A quick like and subscribe really helps our channel grow and allows us to bring you even more amazing content. Thank you for your support.
Hey there, I'm Ruth. If you're watching this, I guess you're interested in revenge, perhaps you're on the brink of it yourself. But let me take you back to the moment that changed everything for me. Picture this, a small suburban town, the kind of place where secrets are buried behind white picket fences and friendly smiles. The sun was shining on a crisp autumn afternoon, and the leaves were a cascade of red and gold, but all I could see was the darkness creeping into my life. I was a junior in high school, just a regular girl trying to navigate the murky waters of adolescence. I had dreams of going to art school, sitting at my easel, and painting masterpieces that would make my mother proud. My mom is my rock, a single parent who always encouraged me to chase my dreams. She worked 2 jobs to give me everything, and I admired her resilience. But life was about to throw us a curveball that neither of us saw coming. Then there was Mia, my best friend since childhood. We shared everything, secrets, laughter, and even our fears. We were inseparable until one afternoon in late October, when the leaves crunched beneath our feet and the air was fragrant with the promise of Halloween. That day, something shifted. I watched as Mia crossed paths with Jason Collins, a guy from our school with a smile that could charm the world. He was handsome, popular, and had a reputation for being a heartbreaker. I always thought he was out of reach for someone like me. But what I didn't realize was that Mia had her sights set on him, and soon enough, she was swept away into a whirlwind romance I never saw coming. I wanted to be supportive, after all, who wouldn't want to see their best friend happy? But as the weeks passed, I could feel the distance between us growing. Phone calls turned into texts, and texts turned into silence. I was losing my best friend, and it hurt more than I could bear. On a frigid November evening, at a party I was too shy to attend, everything fell apart. When I finally gathered the courage to show up, I walked into a scene that would haunt me forever. There she was, Mia, tangled in Jason's arms, laughing like I had forgotten how to. I felt my heart shatter in that moment, as if the air was sucked from the room. It was a betrayal that cut deeper than I could have imagined. I confronted her that night, and in a moment of anger and disbelief, I saw the real Mia, the girl who cared more about popularity than friendship. She shrugged off my hurt as if it were nothing, her eyes gleaming with a satisfaction that twisted the knife deeper. "You were just holding me back, Ruth," she said, as if those words could justify the devastation she had caused. That's when the spark of revenge ignited in my chest, a burning desire for justice. It wasn't just about the betrayal anymore, it was about reclaiming my power. I started plotting a way to show Mia that I wouldn't be the footnote in her story. So here I am, on a journey that started with heartbreak but has turned into a quest for vengeance. As I share my story, I hope you'll see pieces of your own struggles and maybe even find inspiration in what I learned along the way. After all, revenge isn't always sweet, sometimes it has to be earned. And mine was just getting started. As I stood there in that suffocating living room, surrounded by laughter that felt like daggers, the confusion and disbelief twisted into a gut-wrenching pain. Mia was my sister in spirit, the person I thought I could count on, and she was throwing away our friendship for a fleeting romance with Jason. I had always feared rejection, but this wasn't just rejection, it was betrayal. The laughter echoed in my mind as I replayed the moments of our friendship, sleepovers where we shared dreams, hushed confessions beneath starry skies, and heart-to-heart talks about our futures. I had supported her when she struggled with insecurities, cheered her on through heartbreaks of her own, and now she was leaving me in the dust for someone who barely knew her. The irony stung, as if the universe was laughing along with her, mocking my loyalty. That night, when I confronted her, I didn't just see Mia, I felt the weight of every shared moment collapsing between us, like a building crumbling under the force of a wrecking ball. "You were just holding me back, Ruth," she had said, her voice dripping with indifference. I could scarcely believe what I was hearing. The words clung to me, taunting me in the quiet moments that followed. I found solace in my room, allowing the tears to stream down my cheeks as I clutched the fabric of my stuffed bear, the only relic of my childhood that had survived the storm. How could she not see the value of what we had? How could she throw me aside so easily for a guy who would likely move on to the next shiny object when the thrill wore off? As I scrolled through social media the next day, my heart pounding as I anticipated what I'd see, I found pictures of them together, beaming grins, arms wrapped around each other, Jason's charming smile contrasting so sharply with the betrayal I felt in my own heart. It was like a punch to the gut each time I saw them together, kissing under the autumn leaves, the very leaves we used to jump into as kids. I was an outsider looking in, and the dull ache of loneliness crept in like a thief in the night. But beneath that pain, something dark began to brew. I felt a surge of anger, a fire igniting deep within me. No longer would I allow Mia to dictate my worth or let her bask in the glow of her new life while I melted away in the shadows of my own heartbreak. I had been so focused on the friendship that I had neglected to love myself, and now it was time to change that. My thoughts began to race, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the betrayal was not just an emotional wound, it was a catalyst, pushing me into a new realm of understanding. I started to sketch out my plan late at night, the dim light of my desk lamp illuminating my determination. I would show Mia that this wasn't just a game to me. I would reveal the ugly side of her fairy tale, show her the consequences of her choice to trivialize our bond. What if I exposed her to the very people she was trying to impress? What if I revealed the truth about Jason? After all, he was a notorious player, and if Mia thought she had just bagged a trophy, she had another thing coming. I would dig deep, uncover his past, and unravel the image she held so dearly. Maybe then, she would understand the price of her betrayal, a price that would force her to question her values and feel the weight of her choices. As I plotted my revenge, I felt a strange exhilaration wash over me, fueling the fire burning in my chest. This was no longer just about heartbreak, it was about reclaiming my narrative, reclaiming my life. I wouldn't be the girl left behind while she waltzed off into the sunset. No, I would rise like a phoenix from the ashes of our friendship, and the world would see that I was so much more than just the girl who lost her best friend. With every passing day, the desire for revenge morphed into a resolve that felt palpable. This was my moment. I would make sure Mia understood the true cost of betrayal, and I would reclaim my story. Revenge was on the horizon, and it called to me like a siren song, promising not just justice, but a sense of empowerment I had long forgotten existed. Days turned into weeks, and with each sunrise, the ache in my heart shifted into something darker, something more powerful. My anger transformed into a relentless machine, feeding off every moment of pain, every whispered secret shared between Mia and Jason, and every glance exchanged in the hallways of our high school. With each passing day, the reality of my situation settled deeper within me, and it was clear, I needed to act. At first, I started small. I began by subtly distancing myself from the crowd that once included Mia. I slipped into the background, observing their every move through the lens of my own anger and hurt. I watched as Mia basked in her new popularity, wearing her new relationship like a badge of honor. It gnawed at me, the way she flaunted her happiness, as if our years of friendship were nothing more than a forgotten chapter. One afternoon, while hiding behind the library stacks, I caught sight of Mia and Jason. They were huddled close, their laughter echoing off the walls like an ominous taunt. I could see her face alight with joy, and the rage within me swelled as I realized how far she had gone, all while I suffered in silence. The world around me blurred as I felt the suffocating grip of jealousy tighten its hold. In that moment, I knew I needed more than just petty revenge. I needed to unravel the very fabric of the fairy tale she was living. I wanted to expose the truth beneath the smooth surface of Jason's charm. My heart raced as I remembered the rumors I had heard whispered in the school hallways about him, stories of broken hearts and lies. I had to dig deeper, and I knew just who to ask. I reached out to Jenna, a girl from the cheer team who had once confided in me about Jason's past conquests. Over a lunch that felt charged with unspoken tension, I kept my voice casual as I asked her about him, pretending to be curious rather than vindictive. She obliged, recounting tales of how Jason had played with the hearts of several girls, leaving them shattered in his wake without a second thought. My heart raced with anticipation as I took in every detail, every sordid story. They began to formulate a plan in my mind, a way to strike back at Mia without revealing my hand just yet. I spent hours assembling evidence, screenshots of messages, whispered confessions, and even a few candid photos I'd gathered from social media. Each piece felt like a dagger, a testament to the truth that lay beneath Jason's polished exterior. I could almost feel the weight of it in my hands, and the thrill of revenge electrified my veins. But as my plan started to take shape, the escalation took a darker turn. I began to notice the changes in myself, the way my heart hardened with each passing day. I was consumed, layered in a cold anger that eclipsed my grief. I wasn't just plotting revenge, I was transforming into someone I barely recognized. I would look in the mirror and see the shadows under my eyes and the tightness in my jaw. Where once I had been filled with dreams of artistry, I now saw a girl driven by an insatiable desire for retribution. Then came the moment I had been anxiously waiting for. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low in the sky, I found myself standing outside the gym, the excitement almost palpable. I had orchestrated my chance, and now it was time to unleash my plan. During basketball practice, I sent a message to Mia anonymously, teasing her with the promise of some interesting news about Jason. I could picture her face as she read the message, confusion and curiosity mingling in her expression. A part of me felt a twinge of guilt, but it was quickly drowned out by the thrill of what I had set in motion. I watched as she paced outside the gym, her phone glued to her ear, desperately trying to decipher who had sent the message. My heart raced with every moment of uncertainty, and the satisfaction of knowing I had her on edge was intoxicating. And then, like a cruel twist of fate, everything spiraled. Mia confronted me the following day, her eyes blazing with rage and hurt. "Did you send that message?" she demanded, her voice shaking with emotion. For a fleeting second, guilt lanced through me. I had been so focused on my revenge that I hadn't considered the ramifications. But the answer was clear, I couldn't back down now. "No," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos swirling within. "But you should really find out who it was." I watched as realization dawned on her, the flicker of fear in her eyes igniting my sense of satisfaction. But that satisfaction quickly turned to dread as I began to see the consequences of it. Was the day after Mia confronted me that everything changed. I was sitting in my room, the soft glow of my desk lamp illuminating the pages of my sketchbook, but I barely noticed. I was lost in thought, the adrenaline of the confrontation still coursing through my veins. I could still see the anger and betrayal etched across her face, and it stirred something within me, a mixture of exhilaration and dread. This was no longer just a plan of revenge, it was becoming an obsession. The phone buzzed next to me, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was a group chat with a few remaining friends from my art club. They were talking about a party at Jason's house that weekend, a gathering that would mark the height of his and Mia's new relationship. As I read through their messages, a wave of disgust washed over me. The world was eager to celebrate their love, but all I could think about was how blind they all were to the truth. It felt like a sick joke, and I was the punchline. Suddenly it clicked, the opportunity was right in front of me. I had been so focused on exposing Jason's past to Mia that I had forgotten the bigger picture. This wasn't just about teaching her a lesson, it was about reclaiming my identity. I could turn the attention of our peers onto her, onto the very relationship she held so dear. If I played my cards right, I could make Jason an outcast, and in the process, ruin Mia's precious fairy tale. The thought sent a shiver down my spine, but there was a strange sense of clarity that accompanied it. This was my moment. I could feel the thrill pulsing through me, the darkness that had settled in my heart igniting into a reckless flame of determination. I wasn't just fighting for revenge, I was fighting for my voice, for my story, for the girl I once was, the girl who had stood by Mia through everything only to watch her shatter our friendship for a fleeting romance. That Friday evening, as I prepared for the party, a storm brewed inside me. I chose my outfit carefully, slipping into a fitted black dress that made me feel powerful and fierce. I wanted to represent the part of me that had been buried by Mia's betrayal, the part that was ready to stand tall and reclaim my life. I adorned myself with silver jewelry, a stark contrast to the darkness that had enveloped my heart. When I arrived at Jason's house, I let the chaos of the party wash over me, loud music, laughter, and the heady scent of cheap cologne filling the air. But instead of feeling overwhelmed, I was invigorated. I scanned the room, looking for Mia, and there she was, radiant under the twinkling lights, her laughter ringing out like a siren's call. Jason had his arm wrapped around her shoulder, and she looked blissful, utterly oblivious to the storm that was about to unfold. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that I was not that shy, heartbroken girl anymore. I was the architect of my own destiny, and this night would be my canvas. I made my way towards the snack table, where a few of my classmates were gathered. I had spent the last few days gathering pieces of Jason's past, and now it was time to unleash the storm. I casually brought up the rumors swirling around Jason's reputation, stories of broken hearts, lies, and betrayal. At first, it was just small talk, but as the conversation flowed naturally, I dropped hints of my own experiences with him. You know, I heard he ghosted his last girlfriend the moment he met Mia. Can you believe that? I smirked, watching as the initial surprise morphed into intrigue. The whispers grew louder, and soon enough, I noticed a few more pairs of ears perk up, drawn in by the gravity of the tales I spun. With every word, I could feel the momentum building, a tidal wave of attention shifting away from Mia and onto Jason. The laughter faded as those around me began to absorb the information, their expressions turning from amusement to concern, and it felt like a drug coursing through my veins. When Mia finally caught wind of what was happening, her expression shifted from joy to disbelief. She moved through the crowd, her eyes darting from face to face, trying to figure out what was going wrong. I could see the realization dawning on her, a sense of betrayal creeping into her features as she pieced together the fragments of gossip swirling around her. At that moment, I felt a jolt of satisfaction ripple through me. I was no longer just a background character in her story, I was the author of my own narrative. I could see the seeds of doubt creeping into her heart, and with each passing moment, I reveled in as the party unfolded around me. I clutched my drink tightly, feeling the cool condensation trickle down the glass. My heart raced, not with fear, but with exhilarating anticipation. I had constructed my revenge plan meticulously, and now the pieces were all falling into place. First, I needed to ensure that Jason's reputation was front and center. I had already laid the groundwork with my classmates, and now it was time for the final act. I glanced over at them. Mia was still oblivious to the chaos brewing around her, her laughter echoing in my ears like a haunting reminder of what I had lost. I would ensure that she caught the tide of gossip building against Jason, and before the night was over, she would be questioning everything. The first step was simple, I would plant the seed of doubt in Mia's mind. I casually strolled over to where she was laughing with some of her friends, the confident facade I had built wrapping around me like armor. As I approached, I made sure to catch her eye, smiling just enough to feign friendliness. "Hey, Mia. Can we talk for a second?" I asked, my voice light but firm. She looked surprised but nodded, her eyes darting to Jason, who was obliviously immersed in conversation with some of his teammates. We stepped a little away from the crowd, and I could see the curiosity etched on her face. "What's up?" she asked, a hint of tension underlying her cheerful tone. "Have you heard the rumors about Jason?" I asked, feigning innocence. "I mean, it seems like everyone is talking about him tonight." Her expression shifted slightly, confusion mingling with the flicker of anxiety. "What do you mean?" she asked, tilting her head. "Oh, nothing too serious," I said, letting the tension build. "Just some things I've heard about how he treated his last girlfriend. You know, things that might make you think twice." I could see her heart start to race, the smile fading as doubt crept into her mind. "What do you mean? What did he do?" she pressed, her voice almost a whisper now. I leaned in closer, lowering my voice conspiratorially. "I heard he ghosted her right after they got together, left her completely crushed. It's weird, right? You think he'd be different with you, but..." I let the sentence hang in the air, watching as her expression shifted from confusion to shock. Mia's eyes widened, and a panic began to pour across her face. "Ruth, are you serious?" she demanded, desperation bleeding into her tone. "Just something to keep in mind, Mia. You deserve someone who values you, you know?" I said, trying to sound like the caring friend I once was. But underneath it all, there was a thrill coursing through me. I was planting seeds of doubt, and they were taking root with every word. Next, I needed to enlist a few key people to help amplify the gossip. I made my way back to the snack table, where Jenna was chatting with a couple of other girls from the cheer team. I had gotten close to Jenna over the past week, and I knew she had a big mouth. "Hey, did you hear what Mia just found out about Jason?" I asked casually, leaning against the table. "What?" Jenna asked, intrigued. I smiled, letting the rumor slip from my lips like a delicious secret. "I just told her about how he treated his last girlfriend, and I'm pretty sure it's not the first time he's done it. It's going around, you know?" Jenna's eyes sparkled, and the other girls leaned in, eager to hear more. I could see the wheels turning in their heads, the hunger for drama igniting in their eyes. "I heard he's been playing girls left and right," one of them chimed in, and soon the conversation spiraled, with each girl adding her own tidbit, twisting the narrative to further tarnish Jason's image. As the whispers spread through the party, I watched the energy shift. The laughter and merriment faded, replaced by a growing tension. I could feel the anticipation building inside me, a deliciously vindictive thrill. Mia was in the center of it all, oblivious to the storm swirling around her. Then came the moment I had been waiting for, the chance to put everything into motion. I spotted Jason across the room, laughing with a group of jocks, completely unaware of what was happening around him. I approached him, wearing a practiced smile as I leaned in. "Hey, Jason. Can I grab you for a sec?" I asked, my tone friendly but purposeful. He raised an eyebrow but followed me away from the group. "What's up?" I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me as I led Jason away from the crowd, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. This was it, the moment I had carefully orchestrated, the tipping point where everything I had planned would collide. He looked at me with that charming, disarming smile, completely unaware of the storm brewing just beneath the surface. "What's going on, Ruth?" he asked, his tone light, but I could sense an undercurrent of curiosity. I had rehearsed what I would say, but as I stood there, the gravity of the situation settled over me like a thick fog. I took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of confidence I could muster. "I think you need to know what's being said about you tonight," I started, keeping my voice steady. "There are rumors spreading about how you treated your last girlfriend, and honestly, it's not looking good." His smile faltered, replaced by a flash of irritation. "What the hell are you talking about?" he retorted, his posture stiffening. "That's ridiculous." "Oh, it's definitely not ridiculous," I continued, my voice low and deliberate. "People are saying you ghosted her and moved on to Mia without a second thought. It's making waves, Jason. Do you really want that kind of reputation?" I could see the realization wash over him, his expression shifting from dismissal to concern. The room around us faded into a blur, the laughter and music muted as I watched the gears turn in his mind. He opened his mouth, likely to protest, but the words caught in his throat as he caught sight of Mia, who was standing just a few feet away, her face pale as she overheard our conversation. Mia's eyes widened in shock, and I could feel the tension hanging between us, thick like a taut wire ready to snap. I could see the panic settling in her, a realization dawning that whatever fairy tale she had imagined with Jason was now crumbling like fragile glass. The crowd was slowly gathering, drawn by the tension in the air. Whispers began to ripple through the party, curiosity mingling with concern, a palpable energy that electrified the atmosphere. I could feel the eyes of onlookers boring into me, their attention shifting like a tide towards the unfolding drama. I had designed this moment to make waves, and the currents were crashing against the shore. "Ruth, this isn't funny," Jason said, a hint of desperation creeping into his voice. "You're trying to stir something up that isn't there. What's wrong with you?" The defiance in his tone ignited a fire within me. "I'm just trying to make sure Mia knows the truth." I shot back, my emotions spilling over. "You think you can play with people's hearts and not face the consequences? You're wrong. You need to own up to your actions." Mia stepped forward, her voice trembling as she cut in, "What did you say?" I could see the hurt and confusion written across her face, a painful contradiction to the joy she had radiated earlier that evening. "Just telling Jason about how people are talking," I said with a sweet smile, letting the satisfaction sink in. "You were just so happy, but maybe it's time you knew the truth about him." Jason's expression twisted into a mask of anger and annoyance. This is ridiculous, he spat, but the way his gaze flickered back to Mia told me my words were sinking in. I didn't ghost anyone. That's not how it happened. Then what is the truth? I challenged, my adrenaline surging. The crowd had grown, everyone leaning in, and I felt a surge of power with all eyes on us. You can't just dismiss the hurt you've caused. You think it's a game? Mia's face was a whirlwind of emotions, betrayal, anger, confusion, and the flicker of realization that perhaps this relationship wasn't as perfect as she wanted it to be. The moment was becoming unbearable, and I could see the internal battle raging within her. You really think I'm like that? Jason sneered, but the bravado was fading. I care about you, Mia. I thought you knew that. Then why are people saying these things? She shot back, her voice trembling with disbelief. Why is everyone talking about it? A murmur rippled through the crowd, fueled by the growing tension. Jason opened his mouth, likely to defend himself again, but I wasn't about to let him twist the narrative back in his favor. I leaned in closer, my voice steady, because it's the truth, Jason. You can't hide behind your charm and good looks forever. Mia's eyes were darting between the aftermath unfolded like a slow-motion movie, every moment stretching out as the tension coagulated in the air. The party that had been filled with laughter and light turned into something starkly different, a crucible of confrontation. As the crowd closed in, their faces alight with curiosity and a hint of concern, I felt an electric charge in the atmosphere, a tangible sense of reckoning. Jason's bravado crumbled. He glanced at Mia, his confident facade cracking under the pressure of her gaze, which was filled with betrayal and anger. Mia, just listen. It's not, he began, but the words fell flat. The truth I had exposed had ignited a wildfire that he could no longer control. Mia, however, seemed to be caught in a storm of disbelief. She turned toward me, her expression shifting into one of grave realization. Ruth, is this true? Did he really ghost someone? She asked, her voice trembling, the vulnerability seeping through her bravado. The room echoed with whispers, people leaning in and exchanging knowing glances. I could see the pieces falling into place, the spell of infatuation dissipating like mist under the sun. Mia, I said gently, you deserve to know what's happening behind closed doors. You deserve to be with someone who values you. With every passing second, the laughter ebbed into an uncomfortable silence, all eyes glued to the unraveling drama before them. I felt the adrenaline still pulsing through my veins, a potent mix of revenge and vindication. But then, something shifted, a pang of guilt snaked through the thrill of victory, squeezing my heart tight. Mia's expression twisted as realization flooded her face. I can't believe you, she stammered, the earlier warmth in her demeanor evaporating into the cold night air. You're supposed to be my friend, Ruth. You're supposed to support me, not tear me down. Her words struck like a slap. I had become the very thing I despised, a source of pain, just like she had been to me. But the anger in me fought back. You think this is about you? You disregarded our friendship for the sake of a fleeting romance. You humiliated me, I shouted, the rawness of my hurt spilling out in every syllable. I never meant to hurt you, she cried, her voice catching in her throat. I just wanted to be happy. And at what cost? I countered, the bitterness clawing at my throat. The crowd was hanging on every word, the tension palpable. I realized then that I had not only sought revenge against Jason but against Mia too, and it was beginning to feel hollow. As the confrontation escalated, Jason attempted to salvage his image, throwing his arm around Mia in a desperate show of affection, but it only backfired. Come on, babe, don't listen to her. He pleaded. You know how people exaggerate. But the trust that had once characterized Mia's eyes was replaced by a haunting uncertainty. I need to think, she finally whispered, stepping away from him, the weight of the moment crashing down on both of us like a tidal wave. The crowd began to murmur again, the gravity of the revelation settling in. In that moment, I had won my battle, but at what cost? I watched as Mia walked away, her head held high but her shoulders trembling. The realization that I had pushed her away, that I had become the villain in this twisted tale of betrayal, hit me hard. The exhilaration of revenge faded into a bitter taste of regret. As the party began to dwindle, the laughter and music replaced by hushed conversations and uncertain glances, I felt a hollowness within me, one that no amount of vindication could fill. I was left standing there, surrounded by the remnants of what had been, and the fragmentation of my friendship with Mia was carved into my heart, a scar I would carry forever. Days turned into weeks, and the fallout from that party echoed throughout our school. Mia had distanced herself not just from Jason but from the circles we once shared. I saw her in the hallways, a specter of the girl she used to be, lost, confused, and alone. The whispers had turned into a cacophony of speculation, painting her in shades of blame and sorrow. I tried reaching out, sending texts to check on her, but each message went unanswered. The silence cut deeper than any betrayal. I had fought so hard to reclaim my voice, to exact my revenge, but in doing so, I had lost my friend. I spent nights tossing and turning, haunted by the specter of what could have been. I painted frantically, filling my canvases with swirling colors that mirrored the
Hey everyone, my name is Joanna, and I'm sitting down to share something that's been festering inside me for far too long. I'm not proud of what I'm plotting, but sometimes life pushes you to your limits, and all you can think about is how to fight back. If you've ever experienced a neighbor crossing the line, then you'll understand where I'm coming from. Let me paint you a picture of my world. I live in a cozy little 2-bedroom bungalow in a quiet suburban neighborhood, tucked away in a small town known for its friendly atmosphere. Except, the past few years have felt anything but friendly thanks to my next-door neighbor, Mark. Mark is one of those people who loves to flaunt his privilege, always strutting around like he owns the place, because, in his mind, he practically does. He's got this enormous lawn which, I'll admit, is beautifully maintained, but it's not just the grass that's been getting under my skin. It's the incessant noise, his loud parties that go on until the early morning, blaring music so obnoxiously it feels like I'm living in a club instead of a suburb. And then there's his attitude. He's got an ego the size of a house and a knack for belittling those around him. I remember the time he scoffed at my garden, calling my flowers weeds and suggesting I stick to low-maintenance plants. It was a small comment, but it stuck with me, as if he were trying to diminish my entire being. I took pride in those flowers, and suddenly they felt like a symbol of my failures in his eyes. It wasn't just his parties or his hurtful comments. It was the arrogance in how he dealt with people that really grated on me. He once threatened to call the HOA on my son's basketball hoop, claiming it was an eyesore. Never mind that the kids in the neighborhood loved playing with it. Mark didn't just want to be the king of his castle, he wanted to reign over mine, too. I tried being the better person. I had coffee with him on occasion, tried to build a rapport, but every time we interacted, I felt like I was just feeding his ego. He brushed off my concerns and laughed at my attempts to be friendly. That's when I realized, no amount of kindness would ever reach him. So here I am, in this self-imposed exile of anger and resentment, concocting a plan to inconvenience him just enough to knock him off his pedestal. I know revenge isn't the answer, but in my heart, it feels like the only way to reclaim my sense of peace in a neighborhood that's become a battleground. And thus begins my journey, a quest not for destruction, but for some small measure of justice. I'm reaching out to all of you, hoping to channel my frustration into something creative, clever, and maybe even a little fun. Welcome to my world of quiet rebellion, where I'm about to make Mark regret ever crossing paths with me. The tipping point came last summer, a scorching afternoon when the entire neighborhood was parched and on edge. I had just finished mowing my lawn, beads of sweat lining my forehead, when I heard muffled laughter and music drifting from Mark's backyard. I was annoyed, but I tried to shake it off. After all, summer was for gatherings, right? But this wasn't just a small gathering, it was an all-out bash. I tried to focus on the flower beds, pruning and pulling weeds, but the music only grew louder, accompanied by the sounds of clinking glasses and raucous laughter. An hour into their revelry, my son Jake came outside, frustrated and red-faced. "Mom, I can't hear myself think. Can we go to the park or something?" That was my breaking point. It wasn't just the noise, it was the blatant disregard for the rest of us living on this street. I looked over the fence and saw Mark lounging in his inflatable pool, a smug smile plastered on his face, orchestrating his guests as if he were a celebrity at a private event. My heart sank. This was the man who had the audacity to call my flowers weeds, and now he was putting my family's comfort on the back burner for his self-indulgence. The evening dragged on, and after nearly 3 hours of chaos, I finally snapped. I stormed over to his yard, my heart pounding and my fists clenched at my sides. I could feel the stares of guests as I approached, but I didn't care. I demanded he turn down the music. To my utter disbelief, he laughed in my face, an obnoxious, mocking sound. "Lighten up, Joanna. It's just a party. If you can't handle it, maybe you should invest in some earplugs." My cheeks burned with humiliation. I turned on my heel and walked away, anger bubbling inside me like a simmering pot. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was powerless while he reveled in his self-made kingdom. The next day, I discovered that my 15-year-old son had been bullied at school for being the kid whose mom can't even get her neighbor to turn down his music. That was when Mark crossed the line. He hadn't just trampled my peace, he had affected my child. I called my husband, crying, my voice trembling as I recounted the events. His response was to let it go, to rise above it and take the high road. But how could I, when Mark had turned my home, a place of solace, into a source of anxiety and humiliation? Days turned into weeks of simmering resentment. Each time I saw Mark in his backyard, basking in the sun, a knot twisted tighter in my stomach. Every time I heard laughter echoing between the fences, it was a reminder that I was stuck in a one-sided war. I felt like a prisoner in my own home. But in that darkness, something started to shift within me. I began to fantasize about little inconveniences, small annoyances that would disrupt his precious routine. The thought of him feeling the way I had felt that day became intoxicating. Each idea felt like a spark igniting a fire, my rage morphing into a strategy. I wanted him to know what it felt like to be disrespected, to lose a little bit of that smug smile, a chance for him to taste the bitterness of his own arrogance. As the summer heat persisted, I started to plan. It was time for Mark to realize that he wasn't untouchable, that his reign over the neighborhood wasn't as absolute as he believed. I would no longer be the silent neighbor next door. The games had begun, and I was ready to play mine. I needed help, though, ideas that could make my plans not only effective but also deliciously entertaining. And so, here I am, pouring out my heart to you all, hoping together we can craft the perfect, harmless revenge. Because sometimes, the most satisfying victories come not from grand gestures but from subtly orchestrated inconveniences that remind the arrogant of their humanity. The first week of my plotting felt like a pressure cooker simmering just below a bubble, but soon, the heat intensified. I decided to start small, a few harmless pranks that would send a subtle message. With the help of some online forums, I gathered ideas, annoying yet lighthearted tactics that could disrupt Mark's routine without crossing any lines. I mean, who wouldn't want to mess with a lawn that was so proud and ostentatious? I took to the local hardware store, purchasing some fake for sale signs that I could accidentally stick in his yard during one of his loud parties. I convinced myself it was harmless, a way to poke fun at his inflated sense of self-importance. It felt good to laugh about it, to think about how it would make him squirm. But what began as innocent mischief quickly spiraled into something more sinister. One night as I was preparing for bed, I heard Mark's party kick off again. The volume was unbearable, the vibrations creeping through my walls as if the bass was in my very bones. I snapped. I started pacing, a whirlwind of frustration swirling around me. In that moment, my innocent pranks transformed into a fury I hadn't anticipated. I stepped outside, my heart racing, and began to fill a bucket with ice water, ready to spill it over the fence just to see the shock on his face. I hesitated. Was I really going to do this? But then I thought about my son, about the way Mark had ridiculed him. In my mind, it felt justified, until I spilled the water, not over Mark, but onto my patio. It hit the wooden boards with a loud thud, echoing back my failure. It was that very evening that I made my first real move. I found an anonymous number and sent a complaint to the HOA about the noise, listing the violation of local noise ordinances. The thrill of that small act was intoxicating. I felt like I was finally taking control, but it also stirred something deeper inside me, a taste for vindication that I hadn't expected. But then, the retaliation came. Just 2 days later, Mark confronted me while I was gardening, his arms crossed tightly over his chest, a storm brewing in his eyes. "Joanna, I know it was you. You had to stoop low enough to drag the HOA into this?" His voice dripped with condescension, the smug smile replaced by anger. "You could have just talked to me like an adult. But I guess that's too much to expect from a woman like you." Each word cut into me like a jagged knife. I thought I was getting even, but instead, I had opened myself up to his disdain. I felt like a coward and a fool, standing there with my gardening gloves on, vulnerable under the weight of his contempt. I tried to defend myself, but my voice wavered, and the self-assuredness I had mustered crumbled under his glare. That was when I noticed the other neighbors peeking from behind their curtains, their eyes wide, whispering among themselves. I was suddenly the subject of their scrutiny, a neighbor who had gone too far in seeking revenge. Mark had turned my innocuous attempts into a spectacle, and I was the one left humiliated. After that confrontation, I no longer felt like I was wielding the power. Instead, I felt exposed, as if I was holding a loaded weapon with the safety off. It wasn't long before Mark retaliated in ways I hadn't anticipated. Every morning, just as the sun peeked over the horizon, he would start his yard work, mowing the lawn or power washing his driveway with the volume cranked up to 11. I would scramble to close the windows, desperate to drown out the din, but it was futile. It felt like he was out to make my life hell, determined to show me who was boss. Then, I found out he had convinced our neighborhood association to ban my son's basketball hoop entirely. They claimed it was a safety hazard, but I knew it was Mark pulling strings behind the scenes. When my son came home with the news, utterly crushed, I felt a surge of anger that blotted out everything else. I called my husband again, this time in a frenzy, demanding he do something to support our family against Mark's unreasonable actions. His response was still the same: "Just ignore him, Joanna. Don't let him get under your skin." But how could I? The pressure was building, and my efforts to reclaim my space were morphing into a war I never intended to wage. As summer wore on, the situation grew more volatile. My pranks became bolder, more elaborate as I searched for ways to undermine Mark without getting my hands dirty. I had arranged to have a dozen inflatable flamingos delivered to his yard during one of his notorious soirees. I could hardly contain my laughter as I imagined him stepping outside to find a lawn full of bright pink nuisances. But every action had consequences. Mark retaliated by putting up a wooden privacy fence, towering over the existing one, blocking out sunlight from my little garden. And with that, any remnant of peace I had left began to evaporate. In my heart, I still believed I was fighting for the neighborhood against arrogance, yet with every prank that backfired, I felt like I was losing a piece of myself. The spiral continued, each act of revenge fueling another wave of retaliation, and soon I realized I was trapped in a cycle of escalation that was consuming my peace and sense of self. What had begun as a simple desire for justice had now turned into a toxic dance of vengeance. I needed help more than ever, not just in plotting more inconveniences, but in finding a way to reclaim my dignity without losing myself in the process. With every passing day, my anger transformed, and I had to face the truth: I was becoming just as arrogant as Mark. It was time to decide whether I wanted to rise above it or continue down this dark path of revenge. I needed to break the cycle, but how? It was a sweltering August afternoon, and I found myself staring at the blank wall of my bedroom, the sunlight filtering in through the curtains creating patterns on the floor. My head spun with thoughts of revenge, each idea more ludicrous than the last. I could feel the bitterness in my stomach, an unsettling mixture of anger and sorrow swirling within me. I was exhausted, physically from the petty clashes with Mark, and emotionally from the guilt creeping in. That day, I had just finished an exhausting 3-hour battle against my inner turmoil. I had spent the morning dissecting my latest prank, filling his lawn with hundreds of plastic flamingos. I had imagined his face contorting in disbelief, perhaps even the hint of a smirk crossing my lips as I envisioned the chaos it would unleash. But the moment I started to gather supplies, a deep, gnawing feeling settled in my gut. Was I really going to stoop to his level? As I sat there, lost in thought, my phone buzzed insistently next to me. It was Jake, sending me a photo of his latest game, a snapshot of him and his friends at the park, all laughing, all free from the chaos that had engulfed our home. The contrast between my son's carefree smile and the heaviness in my heart struck me. I had been so preoccupied with my own bitterness that I had forgotten what this was truly about: my family, my peace, my son's happiness. In that moment, clarity washed over me like a cool breeze. I realized that I had been consumed by a cycle of petty revenge that was damaging not only my relationship with Mark but also my own inner peace and my family's happiness. I had allowed this neighbor to become the architect of my misery, and in turn, I had become the architect of my own discontent. It was a revelation that shook me to my core. I couldn't keep going down this path. This wasn't me, this wasn't the Joanna I wanted to be. In my quest for justice, I was losing sight of who I was as a person. I didn't want to be that neighbor, the one recognized for pettiness and spite. I wanted to be the person who could rise above it all, who could handle conflict with grace, even in the face of Mark's arrogance. But how? The question lingered, echoing in my mind. I needed to find a way to stand up for myself without resorting to childish antics or going to war. It was time to reclaim my power, not through revenge but through assertiveness. I began to formulate a new plan, one focused on communication rather than conflict. What if I directly confronted Mark, not with anger but with clarity? I needed to show him the impact of his actions, not just on me but on our entire neighborhood. I wanted him to understand that he wasn't just affecting me, but the community we both lived in. That evening, I walked outside. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, and as I approached the fence that separated our yards, I took a deep breath, gathering my resolve. This wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about restoring balance. When I saw Mark outside, tending to his infamous lawn, I felt my heart race. I approached him, my hands trembling slightly, but I pressed on. "Mark, can we talk?" He turned, surprise flickering across his face before settling into that familiar smirk. "What's the matter, Joanna? Had enough of your little pranks?" My heart sank for a moment, but I pushed through. "No, actually. I wanted to discuss how we can coexist better. I feel like our recent conflicts have escalated, and it's affecting not just us, but everyone around us." To my astonishment, the smirk faded. I could see a hint of uncertainty in his eyes as if he wasn't expecting this approach. It was a glimmer of hope. "I don't know what you're talking about," he shot back, but there was a hesitance in his tone. I pressed on, speaking with conviction. "Your parties have been loud enough to disrupt my family's peace, and you've made hurtful comments that have affected my son. I want to find a way to communicate openly instead of resorting to pranks or complaints. Can we work on this?" Mark shifted uncomfortably, and for a moment, I thought he would dismiss me entirely. But instead, he sighed, the weight of our unspoken tension hanging between us. "Fine. But you need to learn to lighten up. I'm not here to hold your hand." I felt a flicker of victory in that moment. We hadn't resolved anything yet, but the door had been opened. I was no longer the faceless neighbor next door. I was Joanna, a person willing to confront the chaos instead of hiding behind petty revenge. It was then that I understood, my journey wasn't just about inconveniencing Mark. It was about reclaiming my dignity, rebuilding my strength, and finding my voice in a neighborhood that had become a battleground. That day marked the turning point in my story, a moment where I chose growth over bitterness, where I decided that the best way to disrupt Mark's reign wasn't through revenge but through genuine communication. And while I still felt the echoes of anger and resentment, I now had the tools to conquer them, not by fighting fire with fire, but by building bridges instead of walls. From that moment on, I was determined to face whatever came next with courage, to reclaim my space, and, perhaps, to transform this chaotic mess into a chance for a new beginning. Because ultimately, real power lies not in vengeance, but in the strength to reach out and connect, even with those who may seem impossible to understand. I still needed help, but this time, it was to gather ideas on how to foster a sense of community, to build relationships rather than destroy them. I was ready for a new chapter, one that focused not on revenge but on harmony. And with that realization, I took a step back from the precipice of chaos and began to walk toward a brighter future, one conversation at a time. All right, folks, this is where things get creative. I've spent sleepless nights plotting, thinking of ways to execute a plan that would get under Mark's skin without resorting to sabotage or anything too drastic. My intention isn't to become the villain, It's to remind him that his arrogance has consequences. With that in mind, here's the detailed plan I've crafted, a series of clever, light-hearted inconveniences to nudge him toward humility while keeping the neighborhood peace in mind. 1. The prankster's scavenger hunt. I'll create a neighborhood scavenger hunt that involves Mark's precious lawn. I'll invite our neighbors to participate, giving them a list of playful items to find in Mark's yard, things like a rubber chicken, a gnome wearing sunglasses, and a collection of colorful pool floats. Each item will be placed discreetly but in such a way that it's visible enough to be noticed. The goal isn't to destroy anything but to fill his yard with unexpected, comical surprises that will make him the talk of the neighborhood, all while keeping the tone playful. 2. The barbecue bonanza. It's time for a neighborhood barbecue, but here's the twist. I'll check with the HOA to reserve the park for a community get-together on a Saturday when Mark typically has his loud parties. I'll send invites to everyone, subtly hinting that it would be fantastic for them to enjoy a relaxing Saturday afternoon with games, food, and fun right when Mark is planning his next bash. This way, his loud music won't be the only sound echoing through our suburb, it'll be laughter and camaraderie from the community uniting against the noise pollution he creates. 3. The mysterious noise complaint. In collaboration with a couple of neighbors who share my frustrations, I plan to submit ambiguous noise complaints to the HOA every time Mark throws a party. The complaints will be vague enough so that they can't be attributed directly to me, like disturbing sounds late at night without specifying what those sounds are. It'll create a ripple effect, and eventually, Mark will find himself questioned by the HOA about his noise levels. For someone who thrives on being the center of attention, being called out for rowdiness will be a significant blow to his ego. 4. The gardening gambit. I will plant a flower bed in the front yard that mirrors Mark's prized garden but with a quirky twist. In between my beloved flowers, I'll add wild elements like brightly colored painted rocks or whimsical garden decorations to create a contrast that's impossible to ignore. I'll make sure the arrangement is vibrant and eye-catching, so much so that it almost feels like a challenge. When he sees my playful rebellion, it'll serve as a reminder of how far he went to belittle my gardening skills. 5. The community newsletter. I'll start writing a monthly community newsletter, spotlighting the positive aspects of our neighborhood while subtly addressing issues like noise pollution. In a lighthearted tone, I'll include sections dedicated to noisy neighbors of the month and focus on promoting understanding and compassion among neighbors. It'll be cheeky, think let's all be the type of neighbor we'd like to have type of vibes. If Mark catches wind of this, he may start to feel the pressure of public perception shifting against him. 6. The local hero initiative. I'll organize a neighborhood hero initiative where we celebrate community members doing good deeds. I'll nominate myself and others who have contributed positively to our street and encourage them to do the same. Who knows? Maybe Mark will want to participate, and I can challenge him to do something beneficial for the community instead of partying every weekend. This can create a platform for conversation about respect and neighborly love, forcing him to reevaluate his approach. 7. The claim to fame. I'm going to create a faux award titled Best Lawn of 2023 and present it to myself, just for fun. To make it even more entertaining, I'll invite Mark over, and during a casual gathering, I'll unveil it while making a lighthearted speech about how a perfect lawn means peace and quiet for the neighborhood. I'll even get a funny trophy with a lawnmower on it. Watching him squirm while I highlight the importance of neighborly respect will be oddly satisfying. 8. Involving local media. If all else fails, I might just reach out to the local newspaper with a lighthearted pitch about our community's quirky neighbors. My intention would be to highlight how everyone can coexist harmoniously, using humorous anecdotes that could include a mention of the loud party next door without directly calling anyone out. If it garners attention, it could bring the consequences of his actions to a larger audience he never expected. With my plan laid out in detail, it's time to put it into action. The beauty of this approach is that it's layered with humor, it doesn't feel aggressive and reflects more on his behavior than my own. The key will be timing and ensuring that each prank or plan unfolds smoothly, keeping the spirit lighthearted and maintaining my integrity throughout the process. Of course, I'll have to tread carefully to avoid crossing the line into vindictiveness, but I'm feeling invigorated by the idea of reclaiming my space without losing sight of who I am. The first step will be the scavenger hunt, and from there, I can build on my ideas, adjusting them as I see fit based on Mark's reactions. Ultimately, I want to create a sense of community that contrasts sharply with Mark's self-absorbed attitude. My hope is that through these clever inconveniences, we can reclaim our neighborhood, not just for me but for everyone who has felt belittled or marginalized because of one arrogant neighbor. Because in the end, it's not just about getting back at Mark, it's about standing up for what's right and reminding him that respect is a two-way street. And who knows? Maybe in the process, I'll even find a way to mend the rift between us, a long shot, but worth a try. Let the games begin. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the air around me crackled with anticipation. I had meticulously plotted my course of action, and tonight marked the beginning of my carefully crafted revenge, a series of light-hearted inconveniences that would disrupt Mark's status quo without igniting an outright war. I could feel the tension coursing through my veins as I stood at the edge of my yard, peering through the slats of the fence that separated our properties. The night was alive with activity as laughter and music spilled from Mark's backyard. I could see the silhouettes of guests dancing, their movements exaggerated in the dim light. A wicked grin crept across my face. This was it, the perfect moment to unleash the first part of my plan. The scavenger hunt would unfold under the veil of his party, a delightful surprise that would make him the unwilling host of chaos. I gathered the supplies I had hidden in my garage, a collection of inflatable flamingos, rubber chickens, and brightly painted rocks. I felt like a mischievous sprite, cloaked in the dark, ready to unleash some whimsy upon this self-absorbed king of the cul-de-sac. My heart raced as I crept toward his yard, fueled by the thrill of executing my plan. The first few items went unnoticed, the music drowned out any sound of my sneaky movements. I planted a rubber chicken right in the center of his meticulously manicured lawn, striking a perfect balance between absurdity and annoyance. Then, I tossed an inflatable flamingo into his pool with a splash that echoed through the night, sending ripples of color across the water's surface. Each item I positioned felt like a little victory, a whimsical jab at the man who had made my life unbearable. But it wasn't until I placed the last flamingo, artfully arranged around the party's gathering point, that I felt a rush of exhilaration wash over me. As I turned to retreat, I caught a glimpse of Mark through the window. There he was, the king of his domain, unaware of the delightful chaos unfolding just outside his carefully curated bubble. As I slipped back into my yard, my heart hammered in my chest. I couldn't wait for the reactions from the guests, the laughter, the confusion, the bewilderment that would surely ensue. But I wasn't done just yet. The barbecue bonanza was next on my agenda, and I was determined to make it a night to remember for everyone in the neighborhood, except for Mark. I gathered my neighbors, those who had shared my frustrations, and invited them to the park the following weekend for the community barbecue. As we set up, the air buzzed with excitement and camaraderie, a stark contrast to the discord Mark had sown. Our laughter echoed through the warm evening air, and I could feel the tension melting away as we grilled burgers and shared stories, creating a tapestry of connection that had been missing for so long. But I still needed to make my point clear. I took a moment to send a text to Mark, letting him know about the barbecue and inviting him to join. "Hey Mark, we're having a neighborhood barbecue in the park this Saturday. It'll be great to see everyone together. Let's celebrate our community." I hit send, my heart racing. Would he have the humility to join us? Or would he simply ignore the invitation, continuing his reign of singularity? As we gathered around, neighbors began to trickle in, bringing dishes to share, and I couldn't shake the feeling of exhilaration that surged through me. The air was thick with the aroma of grilled food, and laughter filled the space, a sound I hadn't enjoyed in ages, overshadowed for so long by Mark's loud parties. At the height of our gathering, I noticed a figure approaching in the distance, unmistakable in the fading light. It was Mark, striding toward us with a mixture of curiosity and irritation etched on his face. My heart raced, a mixture of excitement and anxiety swelling within me. Would he confront me in front of everyone, or would we find a way to bridge this gap? As he reached the edge of the gathering, I approached him, a smile plastered on my face. "Hey, Mark. Glad you could make it." He raised an eyebrow, looking around at the crowd with a forced smile. "What's all this? A party without me?" I thought I was the life of the neighborhood. "Just trying to foster community spirit, Mark," I replied, keeping my tone light. You know, something we've all been missing for a while. He scoffed, folding his arms across his chest. Is that what this is? A bunch of neighbors trying to gang up on me? I could feel the tension in the air, but I pushed through. No, it's not about that. It's about reminding ourselves what it means to be a community. You don't have to throw parties for everyone to have fun together. For a moment, silence hung between us. The laughter of the neighbors faded into the background, and I could sense the weight of his pride pressing down on him. Just as I began to doubt whether this conversation was worth it, a neighbor stepped forward, offering Mark a plate of food. Hey Mark, grab a burger. It's good to see you here. To my surprise, Mark hesitated but then took the plate, joining the gathering. As the evening wore on, we engaged in small talk, and I could see subtle shifts happening around us, other neighbors welcoming him, forcing him to participate in this community feel. The tension was still there, but it was beginning to soften under the weight of shared stories and laughter. Just as I thought the night couldn't get any better, I caught sight of my eldest neighbor, Mr. Thompson, making his way toward Mark. You know, Mark, he began, your parties are definitely lively, but don't you think a little balance wouldn't hurt? We'd love to have you join us more often. We want to get to know you better, be a part of this community, and honestly, we could use some of that energy on a weeknight too. Mark stared, caught off guard by the unexpected push from Mr. Thompson. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, the bravado in his posture faltering. Yeah, maybe I could swing by, he grumbled, the arrogance slowly seeping away from his tone. As the evening drew to a close, Mark and I found ourselves standing side by side, the previous animosity replaced with an unspoken understanding. He turned to me, a hint of vulnerability flashing in his eyes. I didn't realize how much I'd isolated myself. Maybe I should be more involved. I appreciate you reaching out. My heart swelled. This was a moment of poetic justice, a small victory for the woman who once felt powerless. In confronting Mark while managing to maintain a sense of humor and community, I'd reminded him that his arrogance came with consequences, and that perhaps, even he could learn to be humble among neighbors. As we wrapped up the barbecue, I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. My journey hadn't been about revenge at all, it had been about reclaiming my place in the neighborhood while also challenging Mark to look beyond his ego. With every moment spent laughing and connecting, we were redefining our relationships, turning an enemy into a potential ally. As the stars twinkled above, I realized that revenge had morphed into something far more powerful, the chance for healing, growth, and a renewed sense of community. I went to bed that night, not just feeling victorious but liberated, no longer shackled by anger but instead surrounded by the warmth of friendship and understanding. Perhaps, just perhaps, Mark and I could forge a new path forward. And as I drifted into a peaceful sleep, I understood that sometimes the most satisfying rebellions come not from petty revenge but from compassion and forgiveness, a lesson I would carry with me long after the final echoes of laughter faded into the night. The days following our barbecue were filled with a mixture of anticipation and reflection. In the wake of what I had once envisioned as a grand act of revenge, I found myself caught in an unexpected cycle of growth and transformation. I had stepped into the realm of confrontation, and instead of chaos, I was met with the possibility of reconciliation. Mark's shift was palpable, his posture softened as he engaged with the neighborhood in ways I hadn't thought possible. He began to host less ostentatious gatherings, opting for quieter afternoons filled with barbecues that included the very neighbors he had once dismissed. I watched as he made an effort, contributing his culinary skills and slowly dismantling the barriers he had built around himself. This was the same man who had once ridiculed my flowers, and yet here he was, actively participating in discussions about community improvement and engagement. I found myself torn. Had I inadvertently made a friend out of an enemy? As my initial thrill of victory faded, I felt a mix of relief and discomfort. I had wanted to inconvenience Mark, to remind him of his arrogance and how it affected all of us. But instead, I had given him a chance to reflect and grow. My heart grappled with the realization that perhaps, just perhaps, people could change if given the opportunity. Jake, my son, noticed the changes too. He had been skeptical of me at first, the pranks, the plots, the focus on revenge. But as Mark started to engage more with our family, inviting Jake to join in his backyard soccer games. I could see the walls of discomfort begin to crumble. My son's laughter filled the air once more, and I was reminded of the primary driving force behind my actions, the well-being of my family. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. I still felt the echoes of resentment that had once fueled my every interaction with Mark. When neighbors would chat about his newfound civility, I caught myself brushing off the compliments with a twinge of indignation. It was hard to reconcile my initial instincts with the man he had become, and sometimes I found myself resentful of the fact that he seemed to be basking in the glow of redemption without fully acknowledging the pain he had inflicted on me and others. One afternoon, while pruning the flowers in my garden that I had grown to love, I caught a glimpse of Mark through the slats of the fence, tossing a soccer ball with Jake. An unexpected wave of emotion washed over me: pride, relief, and an overwhelming sense of bittersweet loss. My plan had worked, but at what cost? I had aimed for revenge, only to craft a bridge instead. That evening, as I settled into the soft embrace of my couch, I pondered everything that had transpired. My thoughts drifted back to my initial resolve, the desire for a small measure of justice. In the end, I found myself grappling with a deeper realization. I had gone into this journey seeking revenge, and yet I emerged with something much more profound: a chance to foster compassion and growth, not only for myself but for those around me. A few weeks later, as the summer days shortened and the crisp air of autumn began to seep in, I received an unexpected text from Mark. "Hey Joanna, I'm planning a neighborhood cleanup day next Saturday. We're all in this together, right? Hope you and your family can join." I felt a rush of conflicting emotions. It was a simple invitation, but it was also a challenge, a way for us both to officially acknowledge the shift in our relationship. I realized that although Mark had changed, I had to meet him halfway. I responded with enthusiasm, eager to support the initiative while also grateful for the evolution of our neighborly connection. As that Saturday dawned bright and clear, I stood alongside Mark, a stark contrast to the animosity that had once defined our interactions. The neighborhood came alive with laughter and teamwork as we pulled weeds, picked up litter, and shared stories. It was a newfound camaraderie, and I couldn't shake the feeling of hope that filled the air. At one point, as we took a break, Mark turned to me. "I owe you an apology, Joanna. I didn't realize how blind I'd become to the community around me. Thank you for pushing me to be a better neighbor." In that moment, all the anger and resentment I had harbored began to dissolve. I nodded, understanding the complexities of change and growth. "And I appreciate you being willing to listen," I replied, my voice steady. "Sometimes it just takes a little nudge to see what really matters." As the sun set over our neighborhood that evening, I realized I had come full circle. What began as a quest for petty revenge had transformed into a journey of empowerment and connection, an opportunity to foster community instead of division. I had confronted my anger, embraced my vulnerability, and forged a new path forward not just for myself, but for everyone around me. Sometimes, I thought, the greatest victories come not from striking back but from reaching out. In the end, it didn't matter whether I inconvenienced my neighbor or not. What truly resonated was the knowledge that I could choose compassion over chaos, understanding over indignation. As I lay in bed that night, I whispered a silent prayer of gratitude, not for my cunning plans but for the unexpected friendships that emerged from the depths of conflict. It was a reminder that every relationship, regardless of its rocky beginnings, holds the potential for healing and transformation. And with that thought, I drifted off to sleep, my heart lighter than it had felt in a long time, the remnants of anger finally giving way to hope, peace, and the blossoming of newfound connections. Because in the grand tapestry of life, each thread, each clash, and each gentle understanding stitched together the fabric of our shared existence, a vibrant community, alive and thriving, forged in the fires of conflict and the embers of friendship. So, if you find yourself in a similar situation, remember, sometimes the most powerful weapon against arrogance isn't revenge, it's humanity and the willingness to be better, together.
It was one of those rainy Tuesday afternoons where the world feels heavy with secrets, each drop of water an echo of the lies I had been drowning in for months. I sat cross-legged on my bed, the familiar scent of my lavender-scented candles mingling with the cold, metallic smell of the city outside. As I stared at my phone, the screen lit up with another message from him, all sweet emojis and claims of devotion. My heart twisted into knots. His name was Jake, a name that once made my heart flutter but now made my stomach turn. We had been together for 2 years, each moment shared a tapestry woven with laughter, stolen kisses, and whispered dreams. But it was in those quiet moments, when the laughter faded and the silence settled in, that I began to sense something was amiss. I had seen the way he looked at his phone, his face lighting up with a smile that wasn't meant for me, how he'd pull away just enough to keep me guessing. My gut told me what my heart refused to acknowledge: Jake was cheating. My best friend, Sarah, had been the first to plant that seed of doubt in my mind, her voice laced with concern as she recounted her own experiences of betrayal. "Trust your instincts, don't ignore the signs," she implored. Her words echoed in my mind like a haunting melody, growing louder as days turned into weeks. I had wanted to confront him, to demand answers, but fear held me captive like a prisoner in my own heart. What if I was wrong? The thought of losing him terrified me beyond belief. And so, I chose a different path, one lined with cunning and strategy. If he wanted to play a game of deception, I would become the master player. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins as I hatched my plan, a sickening mix of dread and determination swelling inside me like a storm ready to burst. I set out to create a series of fake dates, carefully staged encounters that would unravel the threads of his lies, revealing the truth hidden beneath his charming facade. In those moments of plotting, the world around me blurred, the raindrops outside mirroring the tumult within. I had become a puppet master, fingers poised over strings of deceit, ready to pull them taut. My heart raced at the thought of each carefully orchestrated scenario, the impending satisfaction of seeing his world turn upside down. No longer would I be the one left in the shadows, waiting for scraps of affection. I was ready to expose his betrayal, no matter the cost. But as I prepared to take those first steps into my dark plan, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that revenge carries its own price, one I wasn't sure I was ready to pay. The days leading up to that fateful moment were torturous, each one dragging on like a slow, suffocating embrace. I had set the stage for Jake's downfall, but with every tick of the clock, a part of me faltered. Doubt crept in like an unwelcome intruder, gnawing at my resolve. Was I really ready for this? Yet there was a moment, a single interaction, that cemented my decision. It was a Saturday evening when he'd invited me to his place, his voice wrapping around me like a warm blanket. We had spent most of the day laughing, our playful banter flowing easily, but lurking beneath the surface was an unease I couldn't shake off. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across his living room, I caught a glimpse of his phone, sitting innocently on the coffee table, screen lit up. It was a notification, a message from someone named Lily. Just as my heart sank into my stomach, he casually reached for it, his fingers brushing against the screen in a way that felt too protective, too secretive. My pulse quickened, and I felt a sudden rush of nausea. "Who's Lily?" I asked, my voice trembling as I tried to maintain a facade of nonchalance. He laughed, a light, airy sound that felt like cold water splashed in my face. "Just a friend from work. You know how it is, right?" He said it so casually, as if his words were meant to soothe, but it only turned my stomach further. "You're the only one I care about." Those words hung in the air like a cruel joke. My heart screamed for clarity, but my mind wrestled with disbelief. Who was Lily? Why did he need to shield this friend from me? My thoughts collided in a whirlwind of confusion, each one fueled by a cocktail of betrayal and heartache. Waking up the next morning, I felt like a stranger in my own skin. The light that usually warmed our shared moments had darkened, casting a pall over my thoughts. I spiraled down an emotional abyss, replaying his laughter, his touch, the way he'd looked at me. It all felt like a carefully crafted facade, and my heart, so eager to believe in love, was now battling overwhelming anger. I turned to Sarah, my confidant, my rock amidst the storm. Over lattes at our favorite cafe, I poured out my pain, my fears, and the unsettling dread that gnawed at me. "I just want the truth, Sarah. I can't keep living like this, wondering if I'm just a backup plan." Her eyes softened with empathy, but I noticed the flicker of something else, encouragement. "You deserve to know, and if he's lying, you need to show him the consequences. You have to be bold enough to uncover the truth. Those words ignited a spark within me, an awakening of sorts. It was a call to arms, a reminder that I was not powerless. I could take control of this situation, flipping the script in a way he never saw coming. The thought of deception became less about revenge and more about liberation, a release from the chains of uncertainty that had bound me for so long. It was that same night that I mapped out my first encounter, a blind date set up with a perfect girl I'd found on social media, someone who looked just enough like me to stir confusion and suspicion. I crafted the message so carefully, making sure it would pop up at the right moment. I imagined him sitting at a bar, glancing at his phone with casual excitement, only to be hit with the shocking realization that I was no longer the only one in his orbit. I wanted him to feel the uncertainty I had endured for so long, the gnawing anxiety of wondering if your partner's affection was genuine or merely a performance. But the energy I had poured into my plan quickly spiraled into something darker. As I executed my first setup, I watched from a distance, my heart racing and mind swirling with anticipation. I had arranged for Jake to be at that bar with his friends when the date was supposed to happen. I imagined seeing his face when he received the message, the moment his carefree laughter would falter into disbelief. But instead of satisfaction, I was gripped by an icy dread. What if he truly loved me? What if this pushed him away permanently? The evening came, the bar buzzing with laughter and chatter, and I stood in the shadows, heart pounding as I watched him. The seconds felt like hours as I witnessed his friends egg him on to check his phone. He laughed boisterously, not knowing that the joke was about to be on him. The moment arrived, he pulled out his phone, and I held my breath, anticipation tearing through me. When he read the message, an innocuous but suggestive text meant to spark his curiosity, I saw the flicker of confusion, then the unmistakable spark of intrigue in his eyes. I was shaking with adrenaline, but a tide of guilt washed over me. I was doing this to expose his lies. Why did it feel like I was cracking open my own heart instead? Suddenly, the joy in my scheme turned bitter. Instead of confronting him with the truth, I was reduced to a mere spectator, watching as he responded with excitement. He typed back, and I could see the way his face lit up with flirtation. My heart sank again, this time deeper than before. The laughter of his friends bounced around me, but I felt utterly isolated, a ghost among the living, trapped in my own twisted game. Over the next couple of weeks, each fake date led to an avalanche of emotions. I carefully orchestrated several setups, each one designed to push Jake closer to the brink of discovery. But with every encounter I facilitated, the weight of my guilt became heavier. I felt like a puppet master entrapped by my own strings, the joy of revenge quickly morphing into an addiction I couldn't control. Then, everything imploded one evening when I received a message from Sarah. It was late, and the ominous tone of her text sent shivers down my spine. "We need to talk. It's about Jake." My heart raced, and I felt the familiar sense of dread return. It appeared he didn't just keep secrets from me, he had secrets from everyone. Sarah had seen him, the real Jake, out with someone else, someone who wasn't part of my cruel game. I confronted her immediately, her words crashing over me like waves. "He was with that girl, Lily," she exclaimed, her eyes wide with disbelief. I thought I was imagining things, but I saw them together at the new Italian place. They looked close. It felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. The very foundation of my revenge was now a foundation of lies. I had become so lost in orchestrating his downfall that I had overlooked the truth, the very thing I sought to uncover. I had unwittingly turned into a mirror of the deceit I loathed. The next day was a blur of heartache and anger. How could I have thought this would make me feel better? I could barely breathe as I sat in my car, parked just a few blocks away from Jake's apartment, the weight of my phone crushing against my palm. The shrill ring of Sarah's voice replayed in my head, amplifying the chaos inside me as I tried to comprehend what she had just shared. "He was with that girl, Lily," echoed like a warning bell, and in that moment, everything shifted. The carefully woven web of my revenge, once feeling like justice, now tangled into a choking net around my own heart. I stared blankly at the screen, the glow illuminating the contours of my face, which felt increasingly like a stranger. I had believed I was in control, but now I realized I had become a participant in an emotional game I never wanted to play. I had set up my fake dates as a preemptive strike against betrayal, yet in doing so, I'd only mirrored Jake's own deceit. My mind raced back to the countless hours spent crafting messages, picking names, and conjuring fake personas. I had taken pleasure in imagining his face when he realized what was happening, but now all I could picture was the hurt I was inflicting. What would a part of me become if I went through with this? With bated breath, I pulled up my messages, scrolling through the fake conversations I had orchestrated, the excitement of each date now tinged with an unsettling bitterness. As I contemplated deleting the whole charade, my heart thundered in my chest, a symphony of doubt and fear playing in perfect discord. What would happen if I pulled back now? Would he slide further into the arms of that Lily, creating an even deeper rift between us? Then it hit me like a punch to the gut. I was losing sight of the real betrayal, the truth. I had wanted to expose him, to drag his lies into the light, but I had become ensnared in my own duplicity. I was no better than the man I was trying to dethrone. I had made myself a villain in my own story, and it was suffocating. My hands trembled as I gripped the steering wheel. In that moment of clarity that cut through the fog of anger and betrayal, I realized I needed to confront him, not with a trap or a scheme, but with honesty. I pictured his face, the easy grin that had once brightened my world, and the laughter that felt so distant now. I missed him, the real him, and the idea that I was willing to destroy that made my stomach churn. But before I could convince myself of this new path, I glanced down and saw a notification on my phone, a message from Jake. My breath hitched. Did he know? Was this the moment everything would unravel? I swiped to open the message, my heart racing, only to find it was a simple, innocuous text. Hey babe, can we talk later? I need to clear some things up. The words sat heavily in the air, and suddenly, I was gripped by a chilling sense of urgency, a fear that perhaps he was about to confess something that would shatter my already fragile heart. I bit my lip hard enough to taste blood, the sweet irony of that familiar pain racing through me. Was this the moment I had been waiting for, or was it the prelude to a deeper betrayal? That suffocating feeling returned as I processed everything. I had orchestrated layers of deception, but I realized I was the one trapped. My fingers hovered over my phone, torn between fear and resolve. Did I want to continue? As I sat in my car, the chaos of conflicting emotions swirling in my mind, I resolved to move forward. I had initially set out to expose Jake's betrayals, but now I felt a new clarity forming around my original intentions. I was done being the one bewildered by uncertainty. I would execute my revenge, not to destroy him, but to reclaim my own sense of agency and clarity. With determination hardened by the fear of losing myself in my own deceptions, I sketched out a clever plan to stage one final fake date that would lay bare Jake's true character, while simultaneously showing him the consequences of his actions. This time, I would not just sit back and observe, I would be the architect of my own empowerment. Step 1. Develop the setup. I had already established a few dates that I had set up, each one designed to elicit a reaction from Jake, but this would be the grand finale. I decided to recruit an accomplice, someone who could play the part of the supposed new girlfriend convincingly. That's when I thought of Mia, a mutual friend who had a flair for drama and an understanding of my situation. I reached out to her, explaining everything in detail, and to my relief, she was eager to help. Step 2. Craft the illusion. Mia and I brainstormed a backstory. She would create a social media profile, a cute, outgoing girl named Sophie who just moved to the city and was looking for someone to show her around. Together, we crafted a series of flirty messages, peppered with laughter and shared interests, that would lead Jake to believe that he had stumbled into something exciting and new. I even had Mia send Jake a picture of herself in a cute cafe, casually mentioning how much she liked the same coffee he loved. The more familiar she seemed, the more real it would feel to him. Step 3. Set the date. We agreed on a public place for the encounter. A trendy bar downtown, where Jake and his friends often hung out. I wanted him to see for himself what it felt like to be on the other side of the equation. Mia sent Jake a message inviting him out for drinks, and to my quiet satisfaction, his excitement was palpable. It was as if I could feel his eagerness through the screen. Step 4. The reveal. On the night of the setup, Jake strolled into the bar with his usual bravado, dressed in his casual best, and I quietly positioned myself at a table across the room. My heart raced, not with revenge but with anxiety. What if he didn't take the bait? What if he just brushed it off? My palms were sweaty as I watched him scan the room for this Sophie character, clearly intrigued by the mystery. Mia arrived shortly thereafter, the perfect picture of brightness and charm. She smiled at Jake, and I could see the initial spark of attraction flicker in his eyes. They exchanged pleasantries and began to chat, and with each minute that passed, I felt a mixture of satisfaction and dread. This was the moment he would realize the weight of his actions. Step 5, the confrontation. As the evening wore on, I had orchestrated an unexpected twist. I had confided in another friend, Tom, about my plan, and he agreed to drop by the bar to casually check in on me. He was the perfect wrench in the gears of Jake's deception. As Tom entered and waved at me, I caught Jake's eye, and the realization hit him like a freight climax. Jake's laughter echoed in the dimly lit bar, a sound that once filled me with warmth. Now, it clawed at my insides, grating against the reality I could no longer ignore. I shifted in my seat, my heart pounding as I watched him lean in closer to Mia, his eyes sparkling with mischief. They were building a connection, and with every shared joke, I felt the walls I had erected around my heart begin to crumble. But I had a plan. I inhaled deeply, grounding myself as I leaned into the moment. This was the climax of my revenge. I had to see it through. Tom's presence became my anchor. He approached our table, and I could see Jake's gaze shift. The realization dawned. He knew Tom, and as he pieced together our connection, the smile on his face faltered. The air in the bar felt electric, charged with unsaid words and raw emotions. "Hey, I didn't know you were here," Tom said, his tone casual, but his eyes scanning the situation with sharp precision. Mia took the cue and introduced herself, but Jake's expression was a mask of confusion. "Wait, you know her?" He directed the question at Tom, his voice edged with uncertainty. "Yeah, we go way back," Tom replied smoothly, giving me a quick glance as if to say, "Are you ready for this?" Time slowed. I leaned forward, my pulse racing, heart thrumming in my ears like a war drum. I could see the gears turning in Jake's mind, the realization of something slipping out of his grasp. He was on the precipice of understanding. I could feel it. Suddenly, I stood up, my decision igniting my veins with fury and clarity. "Jake. We need to talk." My voice rang out, slicing through the chatter of the bar. Heads turned, and the laughter dimmed to a hush. Jake's jaw tightened as he faced me, surprise morphing into wariness. "What are you doing here?" he asked, a hint of impatience lacing his words. It was a question brimming with pretense, a thin veil over the truth that lingered just beneath the surface. "Is that so?" I shot back, locking my gaze onto his, daring him to look away. The heat of the moment surrounded us as I took a step closer, feeling the weight of every shared memory pressing against my chest. "You don't think I would let you embarrass me without a word, do you?" His expression shifted, a flash of panic crossing his features as he glanced at Mia. The tension was suffocating, a thick fog of realization that hung heavy between us. Every secret, every lie we crafted, now spiraled into the air like a plume of smoke, dissipating slowly but surely. "Wait, what do you mean?" he stammered, his bravado faltering as confusion danced in his eyes. I couldn't hold back the bitterness that seeped into my tone. "You thought you could have it all, didn't you? While I was sitting at home, wondering if you were actually mine? This is your chance to come clean, Jake. Because if you think you can just waltz away from this with a pretty smile while I'm left in the dark, you're mistaken." Mia caught on, and without skipping a beat, she added, "You're right, Jake. We were just talking about how little we know about you." Her voice dripped with false innocence, a light-hearted jab that cut deeper than any knife. Jake's expression shifted from confusion to panic, his eyes darting back and forth between Mia and me as if we were two predators ready to pounce. Denial flickered across his features like a candle caught in a gust of wind. "This is ridiculous," he said, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. "Ridiculous? You're the one who's been playing games." I felt a surge of power in speaking my truth, exposure transforming the weight of my anguish into something more bearable. "You've been caught between your lies and my reality. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Or did you think I wouldn't care?" The atmosphere in the bar had thickened, whispers floated around us like a fog, all eyes riveted to our confrontation. Time seemed suspended in that moment, and a sensory overload washed over me, the faint clinking of glasses, the vibrant laughter of strangers, and the palpable tension that hung between us like a storm cloud waiting to burst. I stood firm, my heartbeat steadying as I glared at him, determined not to let his bravado rattle me. "You've made your choice, Jake. While you enjoyed flirting with your little friends, I was building a life we could have shared. Did you think I wouldn't find the truth? Or that I wouldn't take matters into my own hands?" His facade cracked, and I could see the real Jake, the frightened boy who didn't know how to face the consequences of his actions. I had expected anger, but all I saw was a mask slipping away, revealing a vulnerability he had hid beneath layers of charm and deception. I didn't mean for it to get this far," he stammered, his bravado fading like a whisper. "And what exactly did you mean?" I pressed. "Was it just another game too? Another opportunity to play both sides?" My voice was sharp, each word slicing through the remnants of the love I thought we shared. "I set up those dates to expose you, but I ended up exposing myself, to the truth about who you really are." He opened his mouth to respond, but the silence between us felt heavy, laced with the aching realization that whatever shred of sincerity he may have had was crumbling. "I didn't want to hurt you," he finally replied, the desperation creeping back into his voice. "Too late for that," I shot back, the passion igniting a fire within me as the room began to buzz with the resonating energy of the revelation. I could sense the weight of other people's attention, their curiosity heightened by the unfolding drama. The emotional stakes had risen, and I felt strangely liberated, like a bird breaking free from its cage. With a final, piercing gaze, I turned away from him, my heart racing as I walked away. I didn't need to hear any more excuses or half-hearted apologies. The truth was laid bare, and I had done what I set out to do. There would be no reversal of roles this time. I was reclaiming my dignity. As I stepped outside the bar, the cool night air hit me like a bomb, washing away the remnants of my turmoil. I savored the sensation of the rain slowly beginning to fall, each drop mingling with my tears, creating a cathartic release. Beneath the stormy sky, I found clarity in the chaos. I had chosen to confront my own vulnerability, and in doing so, I had reclaimed my power. In the days that followed, Jake's reactions were a cocktail of fragmented apologies and attempts to reconcile, but there was no going back. I remained steadfast in my decision.
Title: Doing Small Acts of Revenge to Chip Away at My BF's Sister's Ego. Let me set the scene for you. Imagine a sunlit Sunday afternoon in the small town of Maplewood, where the air is heavy with the fragrance of blooming lilacs and the sound of laughter mingles with the distant chirping of birds. It's the kind of day that feels almost too perfect, where families gather in their backyards for barbecues and the world seems to pause for a moment. And yet, here I am, crouched behind my curtains, heart racing with a mix of anxiety and excitement, feeling like a puppeteer pulling strings in a tragicomedy that only I fully understand. You see, my boyfriend, Alex, has a sister named Jenna who effortlessly steals the show in every room she enters. Picture her, poised and polished, with glossy chestnut hair cascading over her shoulders, and a smile that could light up the darkest corners of a room. She's the star athlete, the top student, and the one everyone turns to for advice. She's the kind of girl whose Instagram is a highlight reel of her perfect life, a life that feels like a direct comparison to my own, filled with the usual messiness and uncertainty we all try to hide behind filtered selfies. As individuals, we are stark contrasts. While I thrive in the warmth of quiet companionship, a little chaos, and honest laughter, Jenna exudes an air of privilege and perfection that makes my heart clench with something that's probably jealousy, but has morphed into something much darker. Every time we meet, there's a subtle contest in her gaze, a challenge that says, "Can you even keep up?" Driven by a sense of inadequacy, I felt my self-esteem eroded bit by bit, like the steady drip of an old faucet. But there's something about the way she glances at me, her perfectly manicured brows slightly raised, that fills me with an inexplicable urge to fight back. It's a game I never signed up for, yet here I am, captivated by the idea of tipping the scales, chipping away at that polished image just a little at a time, small acts of revenge that might not even be noticed at first, but like tiny pebbles dropped into a lake, they create ripples. This isn't the typical story of revenge you might be thinking about. No grand schemes or explosive confrontations. It's quieter, insidious even. Imagine the tension of a tightrope walk, the thrill of balance, knowing that with every step I take, I risk falling. But the sweet satisfaction of disrupting her carefully curated facade is worth the risk, isn't it? So here I am, on the brink of something that might just unleash a storm beneath that meticulously polished exterior. What's the harm in a little fun? Just a few small acts to level the playing field, as I inch closer to what feels like an inevitable confrontation with myself as much as with Jenna. The question is, how far am I willing to go, and at what cost? The day is sunny, but the clouds are gathering, and I can't help but wonder what kind of storm I'm about to invite into our lives. The seed of resentment began to sprout about a month ago, during a casual Sunday dinner at Alex's family home. I remember the moment as vividly as if it were painted in strokes of gray and crimson. There we all were, gathered around the dining table, laughter echoing off the floral wallpaper, when Jenna casually brought up her recent achievements at college. An internship with a prestigious firm, another award for her athletic prowess, and to top it all off, she casually mentioned her plans to study abroad next fall. As she spoke, her voice oozed confidence, a melodic cadence that drowned out everything else. I sat across from her, picking at my plate, each forkful of pasta feeling increasingly heavy as she regaled us with her accomplishments. I wanted to be happy for her. I really did. But with every word, a familiar knot twisted in my stomach. There was an unspoken competition that hung thick in the air, a contest that I hadn't consciously chosen to enter yet felt trapped within. Right, your name? You should totally visit Jenna while she's studying abroad, Alex chimed in, his voice bright and intended to uplift. But I felt the heat of Jenna's eyes on me, and the challenge in her smirk felt like a dagger twisting deeper into my already fragile self-esteem. Sure, that'd be fun, I managed to reply, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. But inside, the conflict raged. I could feel the pressure of her perfection suffocating me, an invisible weight pushing me down into an abyss of doubt and resentment. I should have brushed it off, laughed it off, even. But I didn't. Instead, the idea of my inadequacy crystallized into something sharper, something more visceral. After that evening, the encounters with Jenna grew increasingly unbearable. I started to replay moments in my mind, dissecting every word exchanged, every laugh shared. The way she effortlessly commanded attention made me feel small, like a shadow standing in the presence of light. It was a toxic loop I couldn't escape, and deep down, I knew I had two choices: to continue living in her shadow or to fight back in the only way I felt I could, by reclaiming my worth, even if that meant targeting hers. And then it happened, the final straw that ignited the flame of my silent rebellion. Alex's family decided to throw a surprise birthday party for him, and I was tasked with organizing it. I poured my heart into the preparations, thinking of ways to make it truly special, to showcase not just my love for him but my worth as part of this family. I meticulously planned everything down to the last detail, from the decor to his favorite foods. But Jenna, oh Jenna, couldn't let me have my moment. The evening of the party, she arrived late, like a storm cloud shrouded in glimmering sequins. Her presence alone demanded the spotlight. As guests gathered around her, calling her name and complimenting her latest accomplishments, I felt my heart sink deeper into a chasm of invisibility. The moment I had hoped would solidify my place in this family was slipping through my fingers like sand. Then, during the cake-cutting ceremony, Jenna sashayed over, her laughter ringing like chimes in the wind. "Alex, I hope you don't mind, but I brought you a little something," she said, pulling out a beautifully wrapped gift that sparkled under the dim lights. No one even noticed the cake I had baked, the one made with love and care. All eyes were on her, that perfect smile, the perfect package, the perfect sister. I felt like I was fading into the wallpaper, a ghost haunting my own boyfriend's birthday party. As guests gathered around Jenna to see what treasure she had gifted him, I forced a smile and clapped along, but inside, I felt something inside me crack. It was humbling, humiliating even, to realize that my best efforts, the countless hours I had spent planning this party, were overshadowed by a single moment of her divine intervention. I was supposed to be the girlfriend, the one who mattered, yet there I stood, forgotten. After the guests had left, I retreated to the safety of Alex's bedroom, my heart still heavy with disappointment. Jenna's laughter echoed in my ears, mocking me like a cruel lullaby. I had invested so much of myself into this family, but it seemed they only had eyes for her. In that moment, a thought flickered in my mind: what if I could knock her down a peg? Just once, I wanted to see that smile falter, that confidence falter, to feel as though I was on the same playing field. That night, a plan began to take shape. The first act of my revenge was deceptively simple. I decided to take a page out of her book. For the next few weeks, I shifted my focus to social media, a battleground where she thrived. I began posting snippets of my life that showcased my interests and passions, pictures of me hiking, trying out new recipes, and even some candid shots of me hanging out with friends. I crafted captions that hinted at my successes, subtly undermining her perfect narrative. At first, it felt empowering. I watched as my follower count crept up, while Jenna continued to bask in her curated existence. Yet, the more I posted, the more I realized I was trapped in a cycle of validation I wasn't sure I wanted. My phone buzzed with likes and compliments flooded my notifications, but the hollow feeling inside only grew. I wanted her to notice, to feel threatened, but did I truly want to become like her? Then came the moment that shattered whatever resolve I had left. One evening, I was scrolling through my feed and stumbled upon a photo Jenna had posted, a stunning snapshot from her recent trip to Europe, celebrating her study abroad success. The sun poured down on her, highlighting every perfect contour of her face, every carefree laugh shared with friends. But it was the comments that stung the most. "You're so lucky. I'm so envious." Along with various emojis that could only be described as worship. I felt the familiar knot of jealousy coil tightly around my heart, but this time it was different. A furious determination ignited within me. If I couldn't take her down through my own successes, maybe I could disrupt her flawless facade with a little chaos. I began to plan my next act. During a casual get-together at Alex's house, I orchestrated a small accident. I spilled a drink on Jenna's pristine white dress, drawing gasps from the crowd. "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry," I exclaimed, forcing a smile that felt like a mask. But as I watched her eyes flash with surprise, then anger, a twisted sense of satisfaction bloomed within me. I relished the way her cheeks flushed with embarrassment as she rushed to the restroom, the spotlight of the moment shifting away from her. But it didn't stop there. Jenna's reaction only fueled my fire. I grew bolder, planning small acts of sabotage. I slipped a note into her gym locker, signed anonymously, playfully calling her out on her overconfidence. I had crossed a line, and I felt a mix of exhilaration and shame. The thrill of watching her composure crack just slightly was addictive, and I couldn't deny the rush that came with it. Yet, as the weeks unfolded, I realized this small act of revenge was only the beginning of something darker, more consuming. The final straw came during another family dinner, one where Jenna had once again effortlessly stolen the spotlight. As we sat around the table, her latest saga unfolded, a tale of triumph at a recent track meet, where she not only won but also broke a record, the same record that I had silently hoped to claim once upon a time when I was on the team. The room erupted in applause, and I forced a smile, clapping along as if the sound of my hands clashing together could drown out the bitter taste of envy rising in my throat. But it wasn't just her victories that gnawed at me, it was the way everyone gravitated toward her, how Alex's parents beamed with pride as if she was the only child in the room. I was becoming a spectator in my own life, relegated to the background while the world celebrated her. And then, as if fate wanted to make a cruel joke, Jenna leaned over during dessert and said, "You know, I'm not trying to be rude, but it's hard seeing someone trying so hard when the talent just isn't there." The air felt thick, suffocating. I could feel the sting of humiliation wash over me, the laughter of my boyfriend's family suddenly feeling like mockery. I simply nodded, forcing down the urge to retort, to confront her ego head-on. Instead, I felt the cracks in my facade deepen. The words echoed relentlessly in my mind, amplifying my insecurities until I could hardly breathe. That night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, Jenna's dismissive comment replayed in a cruel loop, mingling with the laughter and applause from the dinner table. I felt like a shadow, a lost ghost, and I could no longer bear the weight of being overshadowed. It was clear to me now, I couldn't simply sit back and watch her reign over my life. I needed to take matters into my own hands. The moment crystallized in my mind when I decided that I would turn my small acts of revenge into something deliberate, something more significant. I would chip away at that polished image, one carefully planned act at a time. Each small rebellion felt like reclaiming a piece of myself, a reclaiming of power that had been stolen from me. I began to jot down ideas in a small notebook, my thoughts morphing from whispers of revenge to a full-blown manifesto of mischief. One act I planned was to subtly sabotage her social image, highlighting moments where her confidence faltered or her imperfections showed. I wouldn't have to destroy her, all I needed was to poke the bubble she lived in, just enough to cause a ripple, to reveal the cracks in her perfect facade. My first target? The next family barbecue was just around the corner, an opportunity ripe for the plucking. I decided to reveal a little secret about her athletic prowess. Jenna had a tendency to exaggerate her achievements. I dropped hints about how she'd conveniently forgotten to mention the disqualifications she had faced in her earlier competitions. The idea sent a thrill of anticipation through me. I felt my heartbeat quicken, not from fear but from the intoxicating promise of reclaiming my narrative, even if that meant tearing hers down a notch. I made my plans meticulously. I envisioned myself casually mentioning it to Jenna at the barbecue. I would let it slip during a casual conversation, perhaps while we were all gathered around the grill, the smoky scent of burgers wafting in the air, or maybe while exchanging playful banter with Alex's cousins. The aim was to plant a seed of doubt, just enough for the family to start questioning her perfect image. I'd keep it light, almost teasing, making sure it didn't seem like an outright attack, more like friendly ribbing between siblings. Revenge plan, date. The family barbecue is set for next Saturday. Preparation. I need to ensure I'm looking my best, dressed casually chic to project confidence. I'll prep a few lighthearted anecdotes to share, making myself the center of attention for a moment before I subtly direct the spotlight toward Jenna's past, reveal the exaggeration. I'll casually mention a conversation I had with one of Jenna's old teammates, someone I could easily have run into while reminiscing about high school sports. I'll make it sound like a lighthearted joke, something that can easily be brushed off but leaves an underlying sting. You remember when Jenna claimed that she was the fastest runner in high school, right? I heard she got a short track record because she didn't pay attention to the rules, like that one time she was disqualified for stepping out of bounds. Timing. I'll wait until the family is relaxed, maybe during a game of cornhole or while everyone is gathered around, enjoying drinks. The laughter will create a light atmosphere, making my words seem playful rather than mean-spirited. Observe the fallout. As soon as I mention it, I plan to watch Jenna's reaction closely. I'm betting her smile will falter, just for a moment before she laughs it off, but I will see the flicker of annoyance behind her eyes. If I can catch that on camera, I'll be ready to record the moment, just a small clip for evidence of my success, planting more doubts. If that goes well, I won't stop there. The following week, at a family dinner, I'll accidentally bring up another one of her supposed victories. Maybe I'll mention that I heard from friends that Jenna had once claimed to win an award she had actually come second for. Just enough to keep the family wondering how genuine her achievements really are. I'll play it off, of course, as if I'm just sharing random trivia. Possible obstacles. Jenna's defense. I know she's quick on her feet and may try to deflect or deny any insinuations. I have to be prepared for that, perhaps by recalling more examples of her exaggerated stories as backup. Family's loyalty. There's a risk that Alex's parents, especially, will defend her. I need to tread lightly here, making sure to keep my tone light and playful while still driving the point home. I'll have to gauge their reactions and adjust my approach accordingly. My own conscience. With each small act, I can feel the weight of my intentions tugging at my conscience. I have to remind myself of my purpose, to reclaim my confidence, without getting lost in a spiral of cruelty. Step 6. The finale, gathering evidence. If my first few attempts at planting seeds of doubt work, but the day of the barbecue dawned bright and sunny, the kind of day that beckons laughter and warmth. I stood in front of the mirror, my heart racing with anticipation, nerves tingling beneath my skin. I had chosen a peach sundress that hugged my silhouette just right, confident, yet subtly inviting. My hair cascaded in soft waves, the sunlight catching glimmers of gold. I wanted to feel good about myself as I prepared for this mission, I needed to embody the energy I wanted to radiate. As I stepped into Alex's family home, the familiar aroma of grilled meat wafted through the air, mingling with the sound of laughter and distant music weaving a tapestry of memories and joy. I forced myself to breathe deeply, embracing the moment. Today was not just about the food, it was about the opportunity to reclaim my worth. Jenna arrived fashionably late, dressed in high-waisted denim shorts and a snug top that accentuated her figure. She floated into the room, all smiles and charm, effortlessly drawing everyone's attention toward her like moths to a flame. I could already sense the familiar knot of jealousy in my stomach begin to tighten. But not today, I reminded myself. Today, I was armed and ready. As the family gathered around the grill, drinks in hand, I approached the group casually, weaving through the throng of Alex's cousins, the atmosphere electric with excitement. Jenna was regaling them with tales of her latest track meet when I seized my moment. I stepped in, feigning nonchalance, and said, "You know, Jenna, it's impressive how you keep breaking records. Wasn't there a little hiccup with the last one, though? Something about disqualification?" The laughter around the grill faltered, eyes shifting toward her, unsure of how to react. For a heartbeat, silence hung heavy in the air, pregnant with anticipation. I felt a rush of adrenaline, and every second stretched into eternity as I watched Jenna's perfectly polished smile falter ever so slightly. I didn't miss the flicker of surprise in her eyes, swiftly masked by her carefully constructed facade. "What are you talking about?" Jenna shot back, her voice tight with an edge that lingered beneath the surface. She forced a laugh, but I heard the brittle undertone, as if the laughter could shatter at any moment. "You must have heard it wrong. I've been winning. Just ask anyone." A confident smile returned, but I could sense the cracks beginning to form. "Of course," I replied, my tone light, an innocent mask. "I just remember hearing someone mention the rules, you know, stepping out of bounds. It happens to the best of us." I tilted my head slightly, letting my words linger in the air like a taut string ready to snap. I could see the shift in the atmosphere, curiosity, confusion, and the faintest edge of doubt creeping into the conversation. Alex's cousins exchanged glances, their laughter faltering as they leaned in, the intrigue palpable. They began to whisper among themselves, their eyes darting back and forth between Jenna and me, a new dynamic unfolding right before my eyes. It was the moment I had hoped for, the moment where her perfect image began to ripple with uncertainty. Jenna straightened her back, jaw clenched tight. "That's not how it went down at all," she insisted, her voice rising above the din of the barbecue, drawing more attention. "You're just trying to make me look bad." The tension in the air crackled, and I felt a thrill of satisfaction at seeing her confidence waver. The barbecue continued on, but the atmosphere had shifted, transformed into a battleground of sorts. Jenna's once invincible facade now felt fragile, like glass teetering on the brink of shattering. I watched her as she tried to regain control, deflecting with jokes and laughter that seemed more forced than genuine. But deep down, I knew I had succeeded in my quest to chip away at her ego, if only by a sliver. Over the next few days, the effects of that family barbecue rippled through our lives in unexpected ways. Jenna's confidence was still there, but it had become a little less certain, a little less unyielding. I couldn't help but notice the way she would occasionally glance at her phone, perhaps checking for social media mentions or texts from family members. I imagined her feeling the growing scrutiny, the whispers of doubt hanging in the air like smoke from that barbecue grill. Surprisingly, Alex noticed too. He would often catch me staring off into space, lost in thought, and I could see the concern etched across his face. "Are you okay? You've seemed different lately," he remarked one evening as we shared popcorn while watching TV. I forced a smile and assured him everything was fine, but could he sense the darkness I had invited into our lives? The guilt that began to gnaw at my conscience was mounting. The true consequences of my actions came to light during another family dinner a week later. As everyone gathered around the table, I noticed Jenna's unease more than ever. She fumbled with her utensils, her laughter strained as she tried to engage in conversation. But this was a different Jenna, a girl who had once thrived in the spotlight but now seemed to search for it like a lost child. When Jenna left the table to take a phone call, the conversation shifted. "What's going on with her?" Alex's dad asked, glancing around the table, his brows furrowed in concern. She seems off. I stayed silent. I wanted to cry out that it was my doing, that I had taken pleasure in dismantling her confidence piece by piece, but I couldn't. The words caught in my throat like a fishbone, causing me to choke on the reality of what I had done. What began as a little poke at Jenna's inflated ego had birthed something much darker, a ripple effect that seeped into every family gathering, every casual meeting. I watched as she struggled for validation, her once bright aura dimming under the weight of suspicion and doubt. Weeks turned into months, and Jenna's demeanor shifted drastically. She began pulling back from family gatherings, opting to spend more time with friends who didn't know her past, her perfect reputation. I witnessed the beautiful irony of it. I had aimed to bring her down a notch, yet the shadows of my revenge had swallowed her whole. The girl who once seemed untouchable was now a mere shadow of herself. But what hit the hardest wasn't the transformation in Jenna, but the reflection of my own actions. Each small act of revenge built upon the last like a house of cards, and I began to see the cracks forming in my own structure. The satisfaction I had felt from watching her falter began to feel like chains binding me to a sinking ship. I still had a life to lead, a reality to face, and I couldn't deny that each act of sabotage felt like a blow to my own integrity. The warmth I once felt in Alex's family home began to feel colder, the laughter that echoed off the floral wallpaper grew more distant. I had become the outsider, the instigator.
You know that feeling when the world just flips upside down, and everything you thought you knew dissolves into a fog of betrayal? That was me, standing in the middle of the campus quad on a crisp October afternoon, the leaves swirling around my feet like a chaotic whirlpool of all the emotions I was struggling to process. The sun was bright, casting long shadows across the brick paths, but all I could see was the silhouette of him, Ryan, laughter spilling from his lips as he surrounded himself with his new friends, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing just a few feet away. I can still feel the weight of the betrayal sinking into my chest, a thick, suffocating fog that wrapped around my heart. Just a few weeks prior, I had been his world. We shared everything, late-night study sessions in cramped dorm rooms, coffee breaks between classes filled with dreams and plans. I was the girl he told his friends about, the one he promised he would never hurt. But promises are fragile, and trust, well, it can shatter in an instant. It started innocently enough. I had noticed the little things, the way he seemed distracted, the way his laughter didn't reach his eyes anymore. I brushed them off, convincing myself I was just being paranoid. But then the texts came, too frequent and too intimate, and in one suffocating moment, my heart shattered when I discovered he'd been with someone else, right under my nose. Her name was Sarah, another student in our sociology class, someone who looked exactly like the girls I had always felt insecure about. I was furious, heartbroken, and most importantly, filled with a desperate need for retribution. The moment I saw them together, standing too close, whispering in a way that felt intimate, something dark coiled within me. I could feel the rage boiling, simmering under the surface, waiting for any excuse to bubble up. I should have walked away, confronted him, or even just cried it out with friends over a tub of ice cream. But deep down, I knew I needed something else, a plan. I wanted him to feel the fear that I felt, to understand just how it felt to be hunted and haunted by what he had done. And so, as I watched him laugh, clueless and carefree, the gears started turning in my mind. What if I made him think he was being watched? What if I became the ghost in his life, the shadow that lingered just out of sight? I wanted to see the worry in his eyes, the confusion. I wanted him to realize that his actions had consequences. It was a twisted, dark idea, but one that consumed me entirely, pushing me deeper into a world of his own making. Little did he know, I was about to become the phantom of his nightmares. The thrill of the unknown, that intoxicating rush of revenge, began to seep into my veins. I was no longer just the heartbroken girl, I was the architect of his fear. And as I turned to leave the quad, blending into the crowd of students who were blissfully unaware of the storm brewing just beneath the surface, I couldn't help but smile. This was just the beginning. I spent the next few days lurking in the shadows, carefully plotting my every move. Each moment was a mix of exhilaration and anxiety, as my heart raced with the thrill of the game I was about to play. I watched him from a distance, noting his routines, who he hung out with, and the places he frequented. It felt a little like a scene from a movie, where the villain is carefully orchestrating their grand plan, all while maintaining an innocent facade. Only, in this case, I was both the villain and the victim, the lines of right and wrong blurred in the haze of my anger. One day, as I followed him from class to the library, a wave of doubt washed over me. Was I really going through with this? Did I really want to sink to this level? But the memory of his laughter with her, the way he looked at me with that cold indifference, was enough to push me forward. I had to remind him of what he lost, to resurrect the ghost of our relationship that he had so carelessly discarded. I waited until the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with colors that mirrored my tumultuous emotions. The campus transformed under the evening lights, shadows creeping out from alleyways and corners, making it the perfect backdrop for my revenge. I donned dark clothing, blending into the night like a vengeful spirit. This was my moment to strike. The first night involved simple distractions, moving his backpack a few feet from where he left it, placing an ominous note written in hastily scrawled letters on a bench he frequently sat on. "You're not alone." It was vague enough to keep him guessing, but pointed enough to spark unease. I watched from a distance, my heart hammering as I observed Ryan's confusion turn to anxiety as he found the note. The way his brow furrowed and his eyes darted around was intoxicating. I felt a twisted sense of power surge through me as he looked around, as if searching for an answer in the dark, just like I had been searching for answers after discovering his betrayal. For days, I escalated my tactics. I left more notes, sketchy reminders of my presence. I would hide in nearby bushes, watching as he jumped every time a gust of wind rustled the leaves. I'd occasionally bump into him, acting like a bystander, forcing a smile while I reveled in his discomfort. Even the smallest twitch in his demeanor felt like a victory to me. But it wasn't just fun and games, it was also deeply unsettling. The line between reality and my revenge had become fuzzy. I replayed every moment of our relationship in my mind, scrutinizing every sweet memory while reminding myself of the betrayal. The emotional push and pull was exhausting. I would lay in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, wrestling with my conscience. Was I becoming the monster he had made of me? As the weeks wore on, the thrill of my plan began to fade into something darker. I could see the toll this was taking on him. His carefree laughter had been replaced with a nervous, furrowed brow, and it struck me that I had turned him into a shadow of the person I once loved. I found myself questioning my own motives. Was this revenge or merely an act of desperation to regain some semblance of control in my life after he had shattered my heart? One evening, as I watched him from a distance, I caught sight of him with his new friends, the same ones he had laughed with so easily when all was right in his world. Now, they were scanning the area with worried expressions, whispering among themselves about the strange occurrences surrounding Ryan. A chill swept through me as I observed the anxiety etched on their faces. It was a moment of clarity, one that struck like a bolt of lightning. I was no longer merely playing a game of revenge, I was responsible for instilling fear, a feeling I had so desperately fought against when I discovered his betrayal. In my twisted sense of justice, I had relinquished my own humanity. The thrill of seeing Ryan jump at shadows and glance nervously over his shoulder began to feel like a poison coursing through my veins, tainting the satisfaction I once sought. There I was, cloaked in darkness, but instead of feeling powerful, I felt hollow, the joy of my revenge fading like the dying light of the day. The humiliation hit hard when I overheard one of Ryan's friends mention how worried they were about him. "He doesn't even want to be alone anymore," she said, her voice laced with genuine concern. Suddenly, I felt sick. I had successfully turned him into a prisoner of his own mind, a shell of the guy I used to know, and it gnawed at me. I wanted him to feel the pain of betrayal, yes, but I never wanted to ruin his life. That night, as I lay in my darkened room, the shadows felt different, heavier. They were no longer filled with the electric thrill of my plan but weighed down by the guilt and doubt I was now grappling with. I tossed and turned, my mind repeating the mantra, "This isn't who I am." I could hear the echoes of my friends' laughter, feel their warmth, and I suddenly longed for that connection again. Instead, I was isolating myself, pushing everyone away while I dwelled in this dark space of retaliation. The following day, I decided to change my tactics. I hoped maybe I could find some balance, alleviate the torment I was inflicting. I left a note for him, one that felt like a glimpse of my fractured self: "You don't have to be afraid." It was cryptic, yes, but meant to convey that I was done playing games. I didn't want to terrorize him, I just wanted him to understand the weight of what he had done. But when I saw him receive the note, trembling hands, eyes wide with confusion and fear, I realized I had underestimated his response. As he read the words, he looked around, searching for answers, relief spilling over into the worried expressions of his friends who had begun to gather around him. They whispered, glancing at me, and for the first time, I felt myself being pulled back into the shadow of my own creation, a mere spectator to the chaos I had unleashed. As the days passed, I noticed something darker brewing inside me, the lines I had tried to navigate became grotesquely blurred. I suffered from sleepless nights, riddled with guilt, yet I continued my charade. I couldn't bring myself to face Ryan directly, terrified he'd see the truth in my eyes, the anguish behind the mask I wore. Instead, I slipped further into my role as his specter, haunting him with a chilling presence that kept him unsettled. Then came a moment that would shatter the fragile composure I had clung to. I overheard Ryan talking to Sarah, his voice strained. "I can't take this anymore. I feel like I'm being hunted," he said, his voice breaking, revealing a vulnerability I hadn't anticipated. My heart sank, a deep ache seeping into my chest. I had become the very thing I had loathed. It was humiliating to realize that the very pleasure I had drawn from the fear I instilled in him had transformed into a sickening weight inside me. I stood against the wall, hidden in the shadows of a nearby building, my heart racing as I listened to him pour out his soul to Sarah, who seemed as perplexed as I felt. She was trying to comfort him, but all I could think was, "What have I done?" "I was just trying to get back at you," I whispered under my breath, as if that could somehow absolve me of the darkness consuming my actions. It felt surreal, listening to my ex-boyfriend, the one I had loved so deeply, voice his turmoil, yet here I was, the source of that turmoil, his phantom, his unseen tormentor. As I leaned against the rough brick wall, the chill of the evening air slipped under my skin, amplifying my sense of unease. I closed my eyes, and suddenly I was back in that moment of betrayal, the piercing realization of his unfaithfulness flooding back with a vengeance. But instead of fueling my anger, it ignited something else, a deep, gnawing regret. I had been hurt, yes, but I had crossed an unforgivable line. I was not just a heartbroken girl anymore, I was a puppet master tugging on the strings of someone else's life, and I was losing control. Watching Ryan break down in front of Sarah, a girl I had once been jealous of, set off a chain reaction of emotions. The initial thrill of revenge was replaced by a pit in my stomach. This wasn't justice, this was cruelty. As he leaned against a tree, shoulders trembling, it hit me like a wave, the final straw had come crashing down. I was not just ruining his life, I was also dismantling my own sense of self in the process. What was I doing? Who had I become? The anger that had been my fuel now felt like poison, suffocating the remnants of my former self. I realized that I didn't want him to suffer endlessly, I wanted him to understand the pain he had caused me, to recognize the gravity of his actions, not to be trapped in a web of anxiety that I had spun. And there it was, the turning point, the moment I decided I needed to end this charade. I watched as Ryan wiped tears from his eyes, frustration bubbling up as he confronted the source of his fears, the ghost I had created. The sight of him like this was like a dagger twisting in my heart. I wanted to scream out, to tell him it was me all along, to confess that I had orchestrated this nightmare. But the fear of revealing myself and the shame of my actions paralyzed me. Staring into the abyss of his despair, I felt a profound sense of compassion transform the bitterness I clung to. I had to take responsibility for my actions, to break this cycle of revenge that had morphed into a cruel game. Instead of lurking in the shadows, it was time to emerge, to confront the mess I had made and reclaim my identity. That night, I didn't leave a note or follow him from class. Instead, I sat alone in my room, wrestling with the duality of my existence, between the heartbroken girl desperate for closure and the vengeful specter I had become. I needed to find a way to let go, to forgive him for what he had done, but more importantly, to forgive myself. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I thought about what had once brought us together, the laughter, the shared dreams, the love we had for one another. It was those memories that now felt like distant echoes, a reminder of the person I used to be before the betrayal consumed me. I needed to create a plan, but this time, it wouldn't be about revenge, it would be about closure. The revenge plan, a path toward healing one. Anonymity and revelation. I decided that if I wanted to end this cycle, I had to reveal my identity but in a way that allowed me to step back from the vengeful persona I had adopted. I would write him a heartfelt letter, sharing my feelings of betrayal and hurt, and explaining how my actions stemmed from that pain. I would leave the letter in a place he frequented, like the library desk where we used to study together, ensuring he found it unexpectedly. 2. A confrontation. After he read the letter, I planned to confront him. Not in a hostile way, but as someone who wanted to talk and find closure. I knew this wouldn't be easy, and I anticipated that he might be defensive or even angry. I wanted him to see the real consequences of his actions, but more importantly, I wanted us to discuss the hurt and betrayal we had both experienced. 3. A new beginning. I recognized that healing could only come from understanding. So, in that confrontation, I would suggest that we meet for coffee, an innocent setting where we could both express ourselves honestly. I would tell him that I was ready to move on, but first, we needed to address the chaos I had inflicted on him. 4. Genuine apology. This part would be crucial. I had to apologize for the revenge I had enacted. I needed to acknowledge that while his actions hurt me deeply, what I had done in return was unhealthy and wrong. I planned to let him know that my intent was, never to ruin his life, it was simply to make him understand that actions have consequences. I hoped this would lead to a moment of honesty, where Ryan could express his regret for cheating and we could both find some semblance of closure. 5. Setting boundaries. After our conversation, I would set clear boundaries for myself and for him. I had to make it clear that I wouldn't be lingering in his life as a haunting presence anymore. I wanted to reclaim my own happiness and encourage him to do the same, so I would suggest we take time apart, focusing on ourselves. This was about healing and moving forward, even if it meant doing so separately. 6. The final note. The last step would involve a final note where I declared my intention to step away completely from his life. I would document everything I had learned from this experience, how I had lost sight of who I was in my desire for revenge, and how I now recognized the importance of self-respect and healing. I wanted him to know that while I might not be in his life anymore, I wished him well and hoped he could grow from this experience. The obstacles ahead. But even as I mapped out this new plan, doubt lingered. Would Ryan understand my intentions? What if my confession led to anger instead of understanding? Would he even feel remorse for how he treated me or see me as just another ghost from his past? I was terrified of the vulnerability this new plan required. Sharing my true feelings meant opening myself up to the possibility of more hurt, but I knew I had to take the risk. I also had to consider his emotional state. If he was still grappling with the fear I had instilled in him, How would he react to my letter? Would he find it unsettling or enlightening? Questions swirled in my mind like the autumn leaves outside my window, drifting aimlessly without resolution. But I took a deep breath, reminding myself that I was done with this shadowy existence. It was time to step into the light, to face the consequences of my actions with courage. The confrontation the day came. I sat in a small cafe, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee swirling around me, a contrast to the knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. I could see through the window as students passed by, laughter filling the air, a world I felt so distant from. With each minute that ticked by, my resolve wavered. Would he show up? Would he even want to talk to me after everything? And then, he walked through the door. The moment our eyes met, a wave of emotions flooded over me. Ryan looked different, more haggard, shadows under his eyes betraying the sleepless nights he had endured. But there was also a flicker of determination on his face. He walked over, tension crackling in the air between us. "Hey?" His voice was low, almost a whisper. "Hey?" I gestured to the empty seat across from me, my heart racing as he sat down. Silence enveloped us like a thick fog. We both opened our mouths to speak, only to close them again. The moment stretched, heavy with unsaid words. I could see the apprehension in his eyes, the way his fingers fidgeted with the hem of his hoodie. I knew he was still haunted, still afraid. Finally, I broke the silence, words tumbling out in a mix of urgency and fear. "I wrote you a letter." I reached into my bag and pulled it out, sliding it across the table. "I think you should read it." His brow furrowed as he picked it up, hesitating, eyes darting from the note to my face. There was a flicker of recognition, of curiosity. He opened the letter, his expression shifting as he read my words, each sentence a fragment of my heart laid bare, each confession a piece of my soul exposed. "I wanted you to understand," I continued, my voice shaky yet resolute. "When I found out about you and Sarah, I was devastated. I felt betrayed, lost. I didn't know how to cope or how to make sense of my feelings. So, I lashed out in a terrible way." He looked up, pain etched across his features, and I could see the moment the realization hit him. "That was you?" he asked, the tremor in his voice betraying a mix of fear and disbelief. I nodded. "I didn't want to hurt you. I just wanted you to feel what I felt. But instead, I became the person I hated." His eyes softened, and for the first time, I could see vulnerability in him that mirrored my own. His shoulders slumped slightly, and the tension in the air began to dissipate. "I'm sorry," he said, almost too quietly. "I never wanted to hurt you. I messed up, and I didn't think about the consequences. I didn't think about you." The words hung between us, heavy with the weight of our shared pain. My breath caught in my throat, and the realization that we both had been victims of our own choices hung in the air like a thick fog. "I don't want to be angry anymore," I confessed. "I don't want this to define us. I want us both to heal." As I spoke, I felt a strange sense of liberation wash over me. The chains of anger and vengeance I had wrapped around myself for weeks began to loosen, breaking under the weight of our shared vulnerability. It was a moment of reckoning, not just for Ryan, but for me as well. Ryan looked down at the table, a mix of emotions playing across his face, regret, shame, and a hint of relief. "I never meant for things to end up this way," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "I messed up, and I thought losing you was the worst thing that could happen. But this, what you did, it scared me in a way I never expected. I felt like I was being hunted, and now I can see how that was your pain mirrored back at me. I deserve that fear for what I did to you." As he spoke, I felt the knot in my stomach loosen further. This was the conversation I had longed for but had never imagined would happen this way. Two broken souls, sitting across from each other, each striving for understanding amidst the carnage our actions had created. "I don't want you to feel like you're being hunted anymore," I said softly. I know, that fear. I've lived with it. But I'm here now, and I want us both to be free. Not from each other, but from this. I gestured between us, the unresolved tension and hurt that had clung to our past like a dark cloud. Ryan nodded, his expression softening as he took in my words. I never wanted to lose you. You were my safe place, and I destroyed that. I wanted to feel something different, but I didn't realize how much I valued what we had until it was gone. His honesty struck a chord deep within me. I had wanted him to suffer, but hearing him admit his mistakes, witnessing his vulnerability, shifted something inside me. I was tired of carrying the weight of revenge. It was exhausting, and in that moment, I could see that forgiveness could be the most empowering form of closure for both of us. We talked for hours, unraveling the complex web of emotions that had ensnared us both. Conversations flowed freely as we aired our grievances, our fears, and our regrets. I learned about the pressure he faced, the overwhelming expectations at home, and the way he had sought escape in the wrong places. He learned about the darkness I had spiraled into, the loss of self amidst the chaos of betrayal. The moment felt cathartic, almost healing. As we shared our thoughts, I felt the burden of resentment begin to lift. Maybe revenge wasn't the answer, maybe it was empathy and understanding. I could see his struggle reflected in my own, and it became clear that neither of us was beyond redemption. When the sun began to set, casting warm hues of orange and pink across the sky, I felt a sense of finality settle over us. It was time to put the past behind us. I reached across the table, and he met my hand with a tentative touch. Thank you for being honest with me, he said, his voice earnest. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but it means everything that you're willing to move forward. I'm not doing this for you, I replied, my heart pounding with sincerity. I'm doing it for myself. I want to reclaim my life, my happiness. And I hope you can do the same. In that moment, something shifted. We weren't just ex-lovers caught in a web of betrayal anymore, we were two individuals seeking closure and understanding.
Hey there, my name is Kimberly, and I never imagined I'd be sharing this story with the world, but here I am, sitting on my cluttered bed in my tiny apartment in Seattle, still surrounded by the remnants of my tumultuous past, the remnants of people I once called friends. It feels strange to relive it all, but I'll never forget the way betrayal swallowed me whole. You see, I was born and raised in this city, a place where torrential rains could wash away your sorrows, or so I thought. I spent the last 5 years working my dream job as a marketing coordinator at a bustling tech startup. I was excited, passionate, and ready to climb the corporate ladder. I thought I'd found my place among a close-knit team that felt like family. But sometimes, even families can be toxic. There were 4 key players in this drama: Jenna, my seemingly bubbly and supportive coworker, Mark, the charming and ambitious team lead, and Lisa, our director, who portrayed an air of warmth but was a crafty strategist beneath the surface. And then there was me, the idealistic dreamer, constantly chasing after validation and the desire to make an impact. I remember the first time I met Jenna, her laughter filled the room like a warm glow. We bonded over late-night brainstorming sessions and coffee runs, and for a fleeting moment, I felt invincible. Mark was the golden boy, handsome with a dazzling smile that could charm anyone, including the higher-ups. He took me under his wing, giving advice and encouragement that propelled me forward. And Lisa? She was an enigmatic figure who played the game of office politics like a grandmaster, her eyes sparkling with cunning. But as the months rolled by, the illusion began to dissolve. The very people I had trusted turned into the architects of my downfall. Jenna started whispering in Lisa's ear, turning my ideas into hers, and I, oblivious, celebrated my friend's success. Mark's charm faded to reveal the ruthless ambition lurking beneath. I soon realized he had his eyes set on a promotion that I believed I deserved. I was backstabbed while under the guise of friendship and support. It was a bitter pill to swallow. I felt like the main character in a tragedy, betrayed by those I had once shared laughter and dreams with. But inside that pit of despair, a fire ignited. I knew then that revenge would take on a form I never anticipated. In the silence of my pain, I found clarity. Often, you get your revenge just by doing nothing and letting them fail. And that's where my story truly begins. It all came to a head one rainy Wednesday afternoon, the kind of day that felt like the universe shared my despair. I was sitting in the break room, sipping lukewarm coffee while scrolling through my phone, when I stumbled upon the company-wide email announcing the new marketing initiative. The highlight. A project that was the result of my late-night brainstorming sessions, my ideas, my heart, presented by none other than Jenna, now the shining star of our team. I felt the world tilt on its axis. My stomach twisted, and I could barely breathe. All that hard work, all those hours spent refining strategies and crafting pitches, and there she was, reaping the accolades while I stood invisible in the shadows. I wanted to scream, to accuse her of theft, but the weight of disbelief lay heavy on my shoulders, paralyzing me. This was betrayal on a level I hadn't anticipated. How could you? I wanted to shout at Jenna, who now grinned across the room, basking in the praise of our colleagues. Instead, I forced a smile, feeling a sickening mix of anger and humiliation clawing at my insides. I should have known better than to trust someone who wore her sweetness like a shield. In that moment, I felt more than just anger, I felt a profound sense of loss. These weren't just coworkers, they were supposed to be my friends. I kept recalling our coffee breaks, the way we huddled together during stressful deadlines, and the late-night talks about our dreams and life outside the office. To see that camaraderie stripped away, replaced by deception, left me feeling hollow. The betrayal didn't just come from Jenna. Mark had been there too, smiling and nodding as Jenna's pitch unfurled, as if he hadn't been the one to encourage me to share my vision in the first place. I could almost hear the echoes of our previous conversations, his words now twisted and tainted. "You're going to be a star, Kimberly," he'd said. But now, I realized those were just empty promises, his way of keeping me complacent while he plotted his ascent. Then there was Lisa, the puppet master pulling the strings. As she beamed at Jenna, I could see the flicker of satisfaction in her eyes. She had orchestrated this whole charade, pitting us against one another, knowing full well that I would be the one left out in the cold. I felt like a fool, caught in a web spun from trust and betrayal, my heart pounding in my ears as the reality sunk in. They were all in on it. It ignited a rage that I struggled to contain. I felt it bubbling inside me like molten lava, threatening to erupt. But amidst that chaos, I found clarity. This was no longer about them winning, it was about me reclaiming my narrative. In the silence of my pain, I started to plot my response, not with fiery vengeance but with cold, calculated restraint. I would rise from the ashes of their betrayal, not through confrontation but by letting time and karma sort them out. I made a decision that day. I would step back, watch them stumble, and let the universe take its course. Often, doing nothing can be the most powerful form of revenge. I had no idea how long it would take for the truth to surface, but I was determined to bide my time. I would wait for the day when they were caught in their own web of deceit, when their facades crumbled under the weight of their lies, because in the long game, the truth always has a way of revealing itself. And so, I entered this new chapter of my life, armed, not with weapons of anger but with the quiet strength of patience. I would let the failings of the very ones who betrayed me become their undoing. Days turned into weeks, and as I settled into my newfound resolve to remain silent, the tension in the office escalated. The air was thick with unspoken words, and I could feel the undercurrents of betrayal swirling around me like a tempest. Jenna flourished in her new role, basking in the glow of her success, while Mark relentlessly pursued his promotion, leaving no room for camaraderie. Each passing day felt like a slow burn, a fierce reminder of everything I had lost. The facade they wore began to crack, though. It started with small things: Jenna mismanaging deadlines, missing key meetings she had once handled effortlessly. I watched from the sidelines, a grim sense of satisfaction creeping in. She was losing her grip, and the pressure was beginning to show. I noticed her snapping at colleagues, her laughter replaced by a shortness that didn't go unnoticed. It was clear to me that the weight of the deceit was suffocating her. But that was just the beginning. Mark, too, began to unravel as the stakes got higher. The promotion he coveted was no longer a sure thing, and his ego was bruised. I could see him trying to leverage Jenna's success to secure his position, but it only highlighted his desperation. He started to make mistakes, missed opportunities, botched client presentations. The once confident leader was slipping into a whirlwind of self-doubt and anxiety, and it was almost poetic to watch. Then came the project that was supposed to solidify Jenna's position. I overheard snippets of conversations during lunch breaks, whispers of dissatisfaction from clients who didn't share her vision. I felt a pang of sympathy for the woman I had once considered a friend, but I quickly crushed that thought. As she stumbled, the realization hit me: I should allow this to happen. I had spent too long nurturing my resentment and anger. It was time to step back and let her face her consequences. Lisa, the crafty strategist, was the last piece of the puzzle. She had orchestrated everything so expertly that it was as if she were playing a grand game of chess. But I could see the cracks in her confidence as well. A few of our higher-ups had started to question her decisions, how she had favored Jenna over others, and why she had allowed Mark's team to flounder. The whispers of discontent grew louder, and soon she was the subject of scrutiny during management meetings. I could see worry etched on her face, a stark contrast to the self-assured demeanor she had worn for so long. It was intoxicating, the way the universe began to shift. I took pleasure in the small victories of their failures, the quiet satisfaction of watching karma do its work. But there was still a gnawing discomfort in my chest. Was I becoming the very thing I despised? I had been wronged, but now I was reveling in their misfortunes. One evening, while reviewing the latest marketing strategy documents, I received a message from an old colleague, Sarah, who had moved on to another company. She wanted to catch up over coffee, and I hesitated for a moment. But the lure of connection, of someone who could understand the weight of my struggle, was too hard to resist. When we met, she listened intently as I shared my story: Jenna's betrayal, Mark's downfall, Lisa's cowardice. Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief as I recounted the events, but there was something else in her expression, a hint of caution. "Kimberly, are you sure you want to keep this up? Watching them fail can be sweet, but it can also consume you. It's like holding on to a grudge, it will only weigh you down." Her words echoed in my mind as I sat in my apartment later that night, the rain pattering against the window like nature's gentle reminder of my own turmoil. I felt a flicker of doubt, a realization that I had started to enjoy this game of sabotage and downfall a little too much. I was losing sight of my original desire for justice, and Sarah's words felt like a lifeline in murky waters. That's when I decided to refocus. I wouldn't let their failures consume me. Instead, I would channel my energy into my own growth. I set out to polish my resume, sign up for online courses, and network with professionals outside my toxic bubble. There was life beyond this episode of betrayal, and I was determined not to let their misgivings define my future. But just as I began to feel hopeful about my next chapter, the climax of my story hit like a thunderclap. It began with a company-wide meeting called by Lisa, who wore her anxiety like a poorly fitted mask. She intended to address the growing concerns regarding the marketing team's trajectory, and you could feel the tension in the room. The air felt electric, charged with the weight of their collective failures. As she rattled off the metrics and pointed fingers at Jenna and Mark, I realized that I had unknowingly become a spectator to their unraveling, a quiet witness to the chaos I had once been a part of. I felt a rush of mixed emotions, relief, sadness, and an odd sense of vindication. They were imploding under the pressures they had invited upon themselves, and I was watching it all unfold, the irony not lost on me. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when Lisa announced a surprise restructure aimed at revitalizing the team. My colleagues were in the crosshairs, and as I sat back, a sense of calm washed over me. I had chosen to do nothing, and in doing so, I had let them fail spectacularly on their own terms. But the emotional weight of the moment was profound, and as I sat through their rising panic, I realized I could no longer find joy in their misfortunes. I had become entangled in their drama, and in that blind pursuit of revenge through silence, I had lost a part of myself. The storm outside raged on, mirroring the chaos within me. Was I truly the victor in this twisted tale, or had I merely become a pawn in a game I no longer wanted to play? With every passing second, I felt more lost, wondering whether the darkness of revenge would ultimately consume me. I needed to find my way back to the light, a path untainted by their treachery. I had wanted to watch them fail, but as the tension in the room reached its peak, I understood that the real battle would not be with them. It would be with myself, the struggle to reclaim my sense of purpose and step into a future unmarred by the shadows of betrayal. And so, I waited, not as a participant in their demise but as a spectator, ready to rise from the ashes of my own turmoil and reclaim my life, and perhaps, in time, even my forgiveness. Often, the real revenge is not about witnessing others' failures, it's about standing tall amidst the wreckage and writing your own story anew. There, in the flickering fluorescent lights of the conference room, reality crashed down like a wave of cold water. The meeting was unraveling, and I could see panic seeping into the faces of my former friends. Lisa was scrambling to control the narrative, while Jenna sat fidgeting, her confident facade crumbling with each question posed by our superiors. Mark, once the golden boy, now looked pale and small, his eyes darting around the room like a cornered animal. It was then, amid the chaos, that I had my moment. As I sat at the edge of the room, a silent observer, I felt this surge of power wash over me, a quiet realization that I had longed for. They were the architects of their own demise. I had spent so much time crafting the fantasy of revenge in my mind that I had been blind to the truth. I didn't need to do anything. They were unraveling before my very eyes, and I had the privilege of witnessing it all unfold without lifting a finger. My heart raced as the reality settled in. I didn't have to be the villain in this narrative, they were doing a fine job of it themselves. I didn't need to shout accusations or confront anyone, all I had to do was remain steadfast and watch as their web of lies twisted tighter around them. The rush of emotions coursing through me felt exhilarating and terrifying at once. Suddenly, a wave of clarity hit me. I was no longer living for the approval of others, nor was I the girl hiding in the shadows, hoping for recognition in a world that had turned against me. Instead, I could become the author of my own story, a narrative that wouldn't revolve around revenge but about reclaiming my strength and dignity. I peered around the room, taking in the frantic exchanges, the rising stakes, and the palpable discomfort. A shiver of satisfaction coursed through me, like a spark igniting a flame. Jenna was squirming under the spotlight, her earlier confidence reduced to a mere shadow of herself. Mark's charm was gone, replaced by desperation. I could almost taste the bitterness of his ambition slipping through his fingers. And there was Lisa, the grand puppeteer, now fraying at the edges, her carefully curated image cracking under the weight of scrutiny. Each question they threw at her was like a hammer pounding at the foundation of her carefully built empire, and I found myself feeling a sense of liberation in that realization. I was done being the victim. Instead, I would allow the universe to enact its own brand of justice. In that moment, the decision crystallized within me. I would not waste my energy in futile confrontations or petty sabotage. I made a promise to myself: I would harness this newfound strength and channel it into something meaningful. It was time to reclaim my narrative, not through revenge but through growth and resilience. As Lisa's voice trembled, struggling to regain control of the meeting, I felt an unexpected sense of peace wash over me. I would step back and let the story play out. I would focus on my own journey, nurture my dreams, and rise above the ashes of betrayal. The tension in the room continued to escalate, turning into a whirlwind of chaos. Jenna's voice cracked under pressure, Mark's bravado faltered, and Lisa's attempts to shield them were met with skepticism. I watched with a detached calmness, feeling lighter with each passing moment. All those months of pain, of betrayal, of hurt, they didn't have to define me. The fire ignited within me wasn't a desire for revenge, it was a blazing determination to forge my own path. I realized that the silence I had embraced was more powerful than any confrontation. It was a space for my own healing to take root. As the meeting drew to a close, I knew I held the cards of my future in my hands. I wouldn't be shaped by their failures, nor would I let the bitterness linger. Instead, I would walk away from that room, lifting my head high, ready to embrace the opportunities that awaited me outside the confines of that toxic environment. And so I did. I stepped into the rain-soaked Seattle streets, feeling invigorated, liberated, and finally free. Often, doing nothing is the most profound form of revenge because it lets them fail spectacularly on their own terms. I was ready to let the world know that Kimberly was not just a victim of betrayal but a phoenix rising from the ashes, ready to write her own story, one that would echo resilience, strength, and the quiet power of personal triumph. This was my turning point, and from here on out, I would embrace every moment, not as a prisoner of my past, but as the architect of my own future. The narrative belonged to me now, and I would make damn sure it was a tale worth telling. Now that I had tasted the sweet clarity of my newfound purpose, it was time to solidify my steps forward. I wanted to ensure that while I distanced myself from the chaos, I also took advantage of the situation at hand. I had witnessed the cracks in the facade of Jenna, Mark, and Lisa. Now, it was time to let the universe take its course while I subtly nudged the fates in a direction that would further expose their failures. 1. Document everything. I started by meticulously documenting every interaction, every meeting, and every idea that had been stolen or misrepresented. I aimed to create a comprehensive timeline of events that would paint a clear picture of the deceit. I would save emails, record meetings, and jot down conversations in a password-protected digital notebook. If the time came when the truth had to be confronted, I wanted to have irrefutable evidence. 2. Build my network. The first step toward my reclamation was to expand my professional circle. I began reaching out to old contacts and former colleagues, rekindling those relationships that had faded during my time in the toxic environment. I attended networking events, tech meetups, and industry conferences. With each connection, I gathered insights, advice, and potential job leads. I wanted to build a safety net that transcended the limitations set by my former workplace. 3. Leveraging my skills. It was time to focus on myself. I enrolled in online courses that would enhance my marketing skills, things like digital analytics, social media strategy, and user experience design. I spent my evenings learning and growing, feeling the empowerment seep back in with each module completed. I was sharpening my toolkit, preparing for a future that didn't include any of the 3 backstabbers who had broken my trust. 4. Sideline alliances. I strategically started building alliances with others in the office who felt disillusioned by the rampant dishonesty proliferating within our teams. I wanted to create a quiet coalition, a group of like-minded individuals who recognized the flaws in our leadership. We would share insights and support one another, ensuring that when the time came to voice our concerns, we would do so with a unified front. 5. Subtle seeds of doubt. While I remained outwardly supportive and friendly to Jenna, Mark, and Lisa, I carefully planted subtle seeds of doubt amongst their peers. I'd casually drop comments about how Jenna's idea was great, but I wonder if she's managing the workload effectively, or how Mark's last presentation seemed a bit rushed, wonder if he's got too much on his plate? My goal was to create an atmosphere where their performance would come under scrutiny without them realizing my role in it. 6. Keep my distance, but stay visible. I made a calculated effort to stay visible within the office, attending team meetings and engaging in discussions, but I gradually withdrew from the social circles I once embraced. I would smile and nod, but I avoided the gossip sessions where treachery thrived. Instead, I directed conversations to topics of professional development or industry trends. This created an aura of professionalism while demonstrating my commitment to growth, setting me apart from the chaos surrounding me. 7. Prepare for the big reveal. As I continued this path of strategic withdrawal and empowerment, I began preparing for the moment when I would ultimately leave the company. I knew that when I secured a new position, one that would allow me to flourish, I wouldn't just be walking away, I would be leaving a legacy of quiet resilience. I made a point to have my next job lined up before I took the leap, ensuring that I wouldn't be at the mercy of my former colleagues' machinations. 8. Final showdown. When the time felt right, I was ready to make my move. I would present my findings to HR, showcasing my documentation of their unethical practices and demonstrating how their actions not only affected my career but the well-being of the entire team. I would step into that meeting armed with facts and a strong moral compass. I wasn't there to seek revenge, I was there to stand up for my truth and set the record straight. Ultimately, the plan was never about retaliation, it was about reclaiming my power, my narrative, and my life. I wanted them to witness their own downfalls, not through hostility but through my unwavering commitment to my own success. I found solace in the knowledge that the real revenge was not in seeing them fail but in rising above the betrayals to create a life filled with purpose and fulfillment. I would emerge from this situation stronger, wiser, and with a story that was truly mine. And so, as I lay out this plan before you, I am reminded of the most important lesson of all: sometimes, doing nothing is the most powerful form of revenge. It allows you to reclaim your agency, focus on your own journey, and let karma unfold in a way that only time can dictate. I was ready to embrace my future, leaving behind the toxic remnants of my past. After all, the best revenge is living well, and that's exactly what I intended to do. The day of reckoning arrived, and it felt electric. The air in the office crackled with tension, a silent storm brewing beneath the surface as whispers of discontent circulated among my colleagues. Jenna's pitch had just faltered spectacularly in a high-stakes meeting, and I knew the ramifications would ripple through the entire team. It was time for everything to implode. The conference room was a pressure cooker. Lisa stood at the helm, her face a mask of strained authority, trying to salvage what remained of her carefully crafted image. The flickering fluorescent lights overhead cast a harsh glow on the anxious faces of my former friends. Mark and Jenna were visibly sweating, their bravado crumbling like the walls of a house built on sand. "Let's focus on the metrics," Lisa insisted, her voice wavering slightly as she pulled up the latest sales figures on the projector. With each number that flashed across the screen, I could see Jenna sink deeper into her chair, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched the table. The presentations Jenna had delivered with such confidence just weeks prior now reflected a downward spiral, and the silence that followed felt deafening. "Lisa, I think we need to address some of the client feedback," one of the senior executives chimed in, and at that moment, I felt a flicker of satisfaction. They were turning on her, and I had positioned myself to be the quiet observer, thriving in the shadows as I watched the fallout unfold. Jenna's earlier bravado faded as the questions became sharper, revealing the cracks in her confidence. We'll get it sorted out," she stammered, her voice lacking the conviction it once held. The room buzzed with skepticism, and my heart raced as I saw the shift. My plan had worked, like a beautiful symphony of poetic justice. Mark, who had once walked with an air of unshakable confidence, was now fidgeting, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. "Maybe we need to consider a different strategy," he suggested weakly, attempting to redirect the focus, but his words fell flat like a deflated balloon. Just then, I felt a flash of heart-pounding exhilaration as I caught Lisa's eye. She was wearing a strained smile that couldn't mask her anxiety. I could tell she was grasping at straws to navigate a ship that was sinking fast. But I didn't want to be just a bystander. I wanted to subtly contribute to their unraveling, and I knew how. "Can we discuss the disconnect between our marketing strategies and client expectations?" I raised my hand, my voice steady and calm. The room shifted to face me, and I could almost feel the weight of attention on my shoulders. "Kimberly, do you have insights?" Lisa asked, her voice laced with desperation. I nodded, taking a deep breath. "I think it's important to reflect on how we've implemented Jenna's recent initiatives. Some clients have expressed confusion regarding our messaging. There seems to be a misalignment in expectations. Perhaps it would be beneficial to address that directly." The collective gasps in the room were palpable. I felt the satisfaction wash over me as Jenna's face drained of color. I hadn't directly cast blame, but I had ignited the spark that would lead to their downfall. Lisa's eyes darted from Jenna to Mark, and I could see her mind racing, weighing her next move. She attempted to regain control. "We will take this feedback into account," she said, a note of false confidence in her voice. But it was clumsy, her bravado was merely a facade, and the tension in the room was suffocating. The executives exchanged glances, murmurs of concern echoing around them. In that moment, I could feel the tide truly turning. My heart was pounding as I watched Jenna shrink further into herself, a shadow of the vibrant woman I had once believed her to be. Mark began to sweat, his earlier air of confidence replaced with a desperate need to deflect blame. "Let's not forget that this was a team effort," he interjected hastily, trying to rally support. "We're all in this together, right?" But the intention behind his words felt hollow. The room had shifted from being a space of camaraderie to one of suspicion and blame. The executive who had initially raised concerns leaned forward. "It's crucial we ensure our strategies align with client expectations, and we can't afford to fail again. If there's an issue, we need a solution, not excuses." The final nail in the coffin struck when Jenna, in a moment of vulnerability, spoke up. "I'm sorry," I thought, but her voice cracked, and the vulnerability in her eyes was unmistakable. The room fell silent as she choked on her words, the truth of her failures weighing heavy in the air. The realization hit me like a tidal wave. This was my moment, the culmination of all my silent suffering and restraint. I could feel the rush of power within me. This was not just their downfall, this was my resurrection. I had fought my own battle, not with vengeance but with resilience, and now I was witnessing the poetic justice of it all. Jenna's tears betrayed her confidence, and as the weight of the moment pressed down on her, I couldn't help but feel a sense of liberation. I was free from the emotional shackles they had bound me with. I could finally see the silver lining, my truth was emerging, and I was reclaiming my narrative. "Perhaps it would be best to reassess the leadership within the marketing team," I added, my voice steady. The words flowed like a river, cutting through the tension. Lisa's expression shifted again, dread creeping into her eyes as the realization of her authority slipped through her fingers. The room erupted into murmurs, and I felt a weight lift. The tide had turned, and I was not just a witness, I was an active participant in my own liberation. As the meeting drew to a close, I felt an unexpected pang of empathy for the broken people I once had called friends. They were crumbling under the weight of their own deceit: Jenna, the opportunist; Mark, the charlatan; Lisa, the manipulative mastermind. Watching their downfall was bittersweet, a reminder that betrayal often comes full circle. Walking out of that conference room, I felt lighter. The rain outside mirrored the cleansing of my spirit, washing away the remnants of hurt and anger. Often, doing nothing can be a powerful act of revenge, and on this day, I had emerged victorious, not by retaliating, but by rising from the ashes of betrayal. As I stepped into the rain-soaked streets of Seattle, a renewed sense of purpose washed over me. The universe had a way of righting wrongs, and for the first time in a long time, I was ready to embrace the journey ahead, unburdened and free. The story was mine to tell now, and I was determined to write it in the ink of resilience, strength, and hope. This was my moment of triumph, my final step away from the shadows into the light, and it felt like the beginning of a new chapter, one where I would no longer be defined by their betrayals but instead by my courage to rise above it all. The days that followed the chaotic meeting were a whirlwind of emotions. I watched as the company dynamics shifted rapidly. News of Jenna's faltered pitch and Mark's defensive posturing spread like wildfire, and the atmosphere inside the office thickened with unease. It felt surreal, like I was witnessing the collapse of a once powerful empire built on deceit and betrayal. Jenna, who had once filled the break room with laughter, was now reduced to a mere shadow. Colleagues who had once praised her success began to question her capabilities, and I could see the toll it was taking on her. She would sit alone during lunch, her eyes vacant, while colleagues whispered behind her back. The tables had turned, and the very people who had once celebrated her ideas were now scrutinizing her every move. My heart ached at the sight, but I quickly reminded myself that she had played a role in my own downfall. As for Mark, the golden boy's charm had dulled considerably. I could see him struggling to maintain his facade of confidence as he attempted to gloss over the feedback from higher-ups. Each time he walked by my desk, the bravado seemed to fade, replaced by a palpable sense of desperation. It was almost painful to watch, but I couldn't deny the satisfaction that bubbled beneath the surface. He had believed himself untouchable, but the reality was something much more sobering. Then, there was Lisa. She had been the mastermind behind the chaos, the one who had orchestrated the betrayals with deft precision. Watching her at work became a fascinating study. Her usual composed demeanor cracked under the pressure of internal scrutiny as she faced questions about her leadership style. The once smug confidence had morphed into a desperate need for validation, a facade as thin as glass. I marveled at how the tides had shifted so dramatically, and in those moments, I knew I had made the right choice in silently allowing events to unfold. But as I witnessed their downfalls, a strange sensation coursed through me. It was not the satisfaction I had anticipated. Instead, it was a wave of emptiness. I had spent so much time focusing on their failures that I had neglected to nurture my own growth. The irony was palpable. I had become so absorbed in their unraveling that I had momentarily forgotten about my own aspirations. Over the next few weeks, I dedicated myself to rebuilding my life, not just professionally but personally as well. I sought out opportunities that had once felt too lofty, reaching out to connections I had almost lost along the way. I attended networking events, and I signed up for workshops to expand my skill set. Each step forward felt like reclaiming a piece of myself, a piece that had been lost in the chaos of betrayal. I began to feel a renewed sense of purpose. The darkness I had once allowed to consume me slowly faded as I embraced the light that came with individual achievement. I was finding joy in my growth, not in the failures of others, but in the realization that my worth was built on my own merits. The final straw came when I was presented with a job offer from a competitor, a marketing firm that boasted an innovative approach and a collaborative culture. It felt surreal to receive that call, and as I accepted the offer, I felt a sense of liberation wash over me. I was breaking free from the chains that had held me captive in a toxic environment, and it felt exhilarating. Before leaving, I decided to confront the shadows of my past one last time. I reached out to Jenna, Mark, and Lisa, offering them a chance to discuss the events that had transpired. The conversations were awkward and tinged with discomfort, but I wanted to convey that while I had chosen to step away, it didn't mean I wished them harm. I expressed the hope that they could learn from this experience and perhaps grow as individuals. Jenna teared up during our conversation. She apologized for her actions, admitting she had let ambition cloud her judgment. Mark was defensive, but I could see the flicker of vulnerability beneath the bravado. Lisa, on the other hand, seemed defensive at first but eventually admitted to feeling overwhelmed by expectations. It was a bittersweet moment, a chance to offer forgiveness, but also a reminder of the scars that betrayal had left behind. As I walked out of that conference room for the last time, I felt a profound sense of closure. I had confronted the past and made space for my future. The betrayal I had endured had shaped me, but it didn't define me. I was stepping into a new chapter of my life, armed with the wisdom gained from hardship. Reflecting on what had transpired, I realized that often, the best revenge isn't about watching others fail, it's about rising above the chaos and reclaiming your narrative. I had turned pain into strength and betrayal into a catalyst for personal growth. As I sat in my new office on the first day of my dream job, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I was finally free. The echoes of the past faded as I looked ahead, ready to embrace the opportunities that awaited me. Life is a journey that can be shaped by our experiences, but it's how we choose to respond that truly defines our path. In the end, it wasn't about watching them fall, it was about learning to soar on my own wings. I had transformed into the master of my own fate, and in that moment, I understood that often, doing nothing truly allows the universe to reveal the truths we need to confront. And with that knowledge, I stepped forward, determined to write a story filled with resilience, grace, and the kind of triumph that could only come from overcoming the darkness.